600, I think.
They got 600-yard rim.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Apple.
Start without Stacy, huh?
I know.
Go there.
Good morning.
I haven't been there, but I worked on them. They were
Okay, yeah.
How are you?
I'm impressed with it.
600 yards.
Yeah.
Well, it was an old dirt mine. Range officers there.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if the guy looked like he told me
Pretty well, in operation.
he's gonna prepare something. Okay. I
And
didn't know who specifically asked him.
And it's not all,
They're gonna like me today either, probably.
the pistol range is here,
Good morning.
and short range is over here. and
It's gonna be a change. I was gonna wear the same outfit. No, no, no.
It's not all.
I'm just joking.
Used to be a,
Oh, that's too funny.
Gotta make you laugh in the morning. Oh, I thought you were about to say, I'm so tired of being sick. I mean, I'm not. Don't sit next to me.
No, I mean, it's been going on for weeks. I mean, honestly.
No, no, no.
They just take over.
So we need to. There's a crunch going around. Everyone.
Terrible.
okay.
Good news, I'll let you.
Yeah, yeah.
Encroachment, I got
Yeah, I mean, someday when you're doing anything.
Yeah, because I want to do something with the rifle.
You're special today.
get this on my thing too. It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, from where you are, they,
I can pull it up at home for my login.
You can download it from the Angela Bibb site.
Yeah.
That's why I downloaded the PDF from
And then you can go on any
but you
computer you want. I do it on my desktop. And then
they want to know who you are.
do this right here. Are you ready, Miss Worthington? Are you ready?
You got a prayer?
Oh, no, Mike's gonna do that. No, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready.
We've been waiting on you.
I'm ready. Are you? Been ready.
All right. Fellas ready? Let's do it. Good morning. This is the Citrus County Planning and Development Commission hearing for September the 5th, 2024. If you'd like to join us at this time, I invite you to please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, please give us the grace to be understanding, patient, and tolerant. With these attributes, we can conduct our work in a manner which will be pleasing to Thee, our county, and its residents. In the Lord's name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for the courtesy of the applicants, the board, and those around you. At this time, if you can place all your cellular devices on mute. And good morning. May we get the roll call, please?
The following Planning and Development Commission members are present. Chair Richard Barmez, James Royce, First Vice Chair, Michael Facemeyer, Robert Shera, Kurt Stone, Stacy Worthington, School Board Representative Chuck Dixon, and alternate Timothy Gilbert.
Thank you. If any person decides to appeal any decisions made by the commission with respect to any matter considered at this hearing, he or she will need a record of proceedings, and for such purpose, he or she may need to ensure that verbatim record of the proceedings is made, which record indicates testimony and evidence upon which the appeal is to be based. During the public input portions of the meeting, individuals are given 3 minutes, and representatives of an organization are given 5 minutes. When anyone wishing to speak comes to the podium, please complete the yellow form, hand to the recording secretary, and please print your name, address, and the number of the application for which you are speaking on the form. The yellow forms can be found at the podium by the front door. If representing an organization, a letter of authorization must accompany the speaker. Comments will be limited to the topics being heard, so please state your name, spell your last name, and give your address for the tape record. Now, at this time, I'm going to open the podium up to the public, and this is an opportunity for you to come forward and address the commission on any issues that you may wish. but this is not the time for you to discuss applications that we're going to be hearing today. So the podium's open if anybody wants to come and speak.
We're going to be speaking about this today. This is for topics that we're not discussing.
Are you here to speak on an application?
Never mind, never
Oh.
mind, you're good. This one was canceled.
Thank you.
I'm a liar.
Thank you. Philip Ulmer, Ulmer, from 7673 West Pedersen Loop, Homosassa. Just wanted to check on, or talk about the letter we got that's talking about multifamily, high density, and I was wanting to find out what that means. I don't know if it means like condos, Section 8 or whatever, but we already have a flooding issue where we're at. It's not up to my house because the house is built up and septic tank's built up, but it's right to it out in the ditches, which the ditch is the one's not properly made anyways, because when they put the road in, they just made it level with the land. So when the land's got it just leveled there, there's no place for it to run off. At the end of both sides, there's water laying. There's water laying across the street. If you do any projects out around there, it has no place for the water to go except for backing it up. And I know everybody says, well, it'll go out into the Gulf, into the rivers, everything else. But I just can't determine where that's gonna be, you know, the flooding and all. We already have homeless people living out in the woods out there. I don't know if it's gonna run them out or closer to us. I don't know the theft thing and all. Right now, we don't have a theft problem where I'm at. I have fence. I moved here. I was retired Army. I moved here to find a place to retire that was away from that. I'm originally from Palm Harbor, so I can't afford that anymore. I can't really afford to keep moving around to try to get rid of the developments. I know you're developing already out in Lecanto and all. There's a lot of development going on, Hobby Lobby, all. And the housing is vague, multifamily, high density.
Excuse me.
No.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I believe he's speaking about an application which is not on today's agenda, but will be coming before you at a later date, so it will be quasi judicial when it comes before you. He didn't say what it was about yet, but it's not today.
It's right here with today's date and says come.
Sir, that's the one I said was canceled.
Pardon?
That application was canceled for today. We're not going to hear that application today.
We didn't know nothing about it, being canceled.
Yeah, nobody said it was canceled. So do you know when?
The county doesn't send notices. Once they're noticed for a hearing, if the applicant makes changes or withdraws or asks for a continuance, there's no new notice published, but everyone will get notice, just like they got for today's meeting, when it is scheduled for the next meeting.
So we came out here for nothing then.
Exactly. We get gas receipts for everything.
Canceled, so-
Unfortunately, the applicant asked for it to be removed from today's agenda.
Yeah, the applicant asked, so that we didn't know until today either. So, but thank you.
Okay, so is today anything involving us?
You're more than welcome to sit back and see. I don't know what.
What was the, I don't know,
Yeah.
help them out.
That application has been, the applicant modified it from a comp plan amendment to a PUD, and so we had to basically reschedule it because of the changes being proposed. And he did request to continue it to a later date, and so we currently have that one scheduled for October 17th.
That's why I canceled my
But-
appointment today, my medical appointment.
But it could be changed too, so they need to just pay attention to whatever notices they get in the mail.
Right.
So you're slipping in when we don't know that, that's what you're saying.
As I said, when it's rescheduled, you are going to get a mailed piece of paper to you, just like the mailed piece of paper you got today.
And that may be rescheduled also, yeah.
It is the applicant's application. The applicant controls when they amend it or not.
That's the one trying to buy my lot.
You're gonna talk.
Mr. Chair, Perhaps we could point out that the agenda is available on the clerk's website for the Planning and Development Commission prior to the meetings.
So the corporations control it instead of the people, the applicant. Okay.
That's correct. Anyone else?
Can you confirm which one he's talking about? Which one is
Rezoning.
the one off of, Rock Crusher?
No.
No. Do we have a number?
Well, the number changed because the application changed.
Okay.
I don't remember
Yeah,
what the
that's right,
previous
it would.
application was, but it was Todd Pressman for Chelovaria. Yeah. That's the one that got rescheduled.
All right, great, thank you. No problem. Anyone else would like to come to the podium? Anyone? All right, this time I'm gonna close the public portion of the hearing down. And we have minutes to approve for June the 20th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
So we got a motion to approve from Commissioner Worthington, a second by Commissioner Gilbert. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, minutes are passed. Thank you. Any staff announcements, Joe?
No, sir?
All right, ex parte communications from Madam Attorney, please.
Yes, Commissioners, with regard to the applications you're going to consider today, have you had any ex parte communications you need to disclose for the record? And we'll start with Commissioner Dixon.
No, ma'am. Site visits and a request to walk a property?
None.
Site visits.
None.
Site visit CPA/AA/PUD-2024-00016.
Site visits?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now, at this time, it's time for application number CPA/AA/PUD-2024-00012. If the applicant's present, can make his way to the podium as we get this staff introduction, please.
Thank you.
I have 1-6.
I think it's 1-6.
Yeah.
6.
CPA PUD 2024-00016, Brenda McKenzie, 4
Okay,
Davis.
time out, please. I have 112, for Pigeon.
The second one, the first one is the 16 Mackenzie.
Oh. They're not in order on my computer. Okay, I do apologize for that. It will be CPA AAPUD 2024-00016, McKenzie and Finley.
Thank you. This request is to change the future land use and the LDC Atlas from low-intensity coastal and lakes to coastal and lakes commercial with a planned unit development for commercial uses. This is an aerial view of the subject property. View of the existing bait shop from South Waterman Drive. View of the existing boat ramp and residential portion from South Waterman Drive. Looking north on South Waterman Drive. Looking south on South Waterman Drive. Looking across South Waterman Drive. The proposed land use request. And the master plan as submitted by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, my name's Brenda McKenzie, McKenzie. I'm with McKenzie Permitting and Consulting. My address is 7232 East Gospel Island Road in Inverness. This is Miss Melissa Finley Johnson, and she's here as managing the property and day-to-day regulations and can answer a lot of the questions as well. We're here today asking to have the bait house itself has been commercial and was built in 1973, so it's been commercial for over 50 years. There's 3 lots here. The lot where the main building is at is already CLC. The middle lot has part of their commercial building straddles onto the middle lot, So we're wanting to get the zoning so that their parcels all have the same zoning, not that one has coastal and lakes commercial and the other two are residential. In the middle lot, the building straddles it, and it is a commercial building that's actually is on a residential lot. And then the third lot is just their property and would make the whole parcel have the same zoning instead of half of their land having commercial and half of it being residential. They're very respectful of the community and want to be good neighbors. Ms. Johnson is day-to-day at the facility and can answer, any board questions probably even better than I can. We're wanting to just clean it up. When they first bought it, there was cars and junk, and there's aerials of that, and they've cleaned it up, painted it. There was bad smells in it. They've actually got it to be a very nice, clean business. And we have a PUD now, Plan Unit Development, showing exactly what the uses will be. So, Ms. Johnson.
Yep. So Melissa Johnson, my address is at 29 West Ipswich in Hernando, Florida. As Brenda said, I represent the Finleys. I am a member of the current property owner there. Our PUD that we're asking for, that was requested last time you were here, is not asking for any development changes. We've actually removed the shed that was encroaching on the easement, so we removed that, so that was no longer an issue with it being too close to the road. We are only asking to be able to rent kayaks, things that we were told that you can't do as a bait and tackle shop. And those items were rentals of the kayaks and being able to let boat captains pick up from our property. So those are a couple items that are currently not able to do with our current bait and tackle permit that we have there.
And I know we've had concern about the boat ramp that's in the third lot. That is not open to the public. That's just been there for 50 years. And they actually have a sign saying not for public use on the boat ramp part of it, which is on the third lot to the left.
And that's why we gated that off, so no one would think that they can use that if they coming out onto that trail.
All right.
Okay.
Does staff have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, sir. Just a couple of questions. I know that for facilities out here, I know there's not central sewer available. Do you know if there's central water available in this area?
Yes, we're currently already on Ozella Water today. So we have those water bills. We do have a septic system, and I've talked to Avance, who does maintain that septic system, that if there's any concerns or issues with the size of that system for this property, and they have no concerns. And we also currently have trash pickup through Waste Management out there in that property. So we're not looking at putting in any, I guess, new septics, anything that would, cause issues, dig up anything in that area.
Okay, and Ozella Water hasn't provided any input as to if this is going to increase capacity or anything like that?
I talked to them, and they don't see where we have increased capacity. We've owned this property now for, so was it 3 or 4 years now? I'm so sorry I couldn't get the exact dates. And we work with the water department. If they ever see any of the properties that we own increase in water, they're quick to call. And then we would try to address the issue. Hey, is this somebody? And we haven't had any of those phone calls, though, on this property in question.
And our PUD isn't asking to build anything additional. The footprint has been existing, and it's been there for, like I said, since '73. This PUD is not asking to add any additional lot coverage or build anything additional. So there'd be no more impact on the water or sewer.
All right. With the existing boat ramp, I know you touched on it briefly. In the application, it states that it can't be used for commercial purposes. It's going to remain a personal boat ramp. Could you kind of describe how you intend to prohibit this boat ramp from becoming a commercial boat ramp?
Well, currently, I think if you saw some of the pictures, you can see there is a fencing and a gate now. So we do have that gate closed. And the only time it's ever open is if we have any of our personal property, like the boats or anything like that, being removed from that area. So that's currently how we control it today, is by gated access.
Okay.
And there is a lock on it, so therefore somebody can't sneak in there and 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, I guess, before people get there.
I gotcha. And if you've read the staff report, you'll notice there's a comment from Technical Services that talks about the existing parking that pulls in directly from the roadway. Could you address maybe how you're going to, well, how you're going to address that parking change?
Well, we've asked for, so I'm guessing I'm confused on what the parking, because we do have parking spots there. When cars pull in the correct way, they do not extend into the road. I know the concern would be, well, what if someone has a boat trailer today? The area in front of that fenced area is open, so somebody could pull a boat trailer along that and be able to park in that section if they come inside. We don't allow boat trailers to, they're not staying, they're not putting in there, so we don't have, and most of the people are coming in currently for fishing supplies, for bait, tackle. We have T-shirts and things, and as well as visitors coming into the area looking for souvenirs when they come out there.
Okay. I guess because in the staff report, there is a comment from Technical Services that states that the existing on-street parking needs to be removed because the Land Development Code doesn't allow for parking to back out onto a roadway directly. Okay. And so I was just wondering if you had a plan on how to address that.
Well, then that would require us to open up the gate and allow the parking behind the gated area, so we would have to then extend that fencing so that we couldn't use the boat ramp. I apologize, I don't have an answer for that one today, but I can definitely look into it and see what we can do to be able to increase the parking that's not on the roadway.
All right, no further questions.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
That's the apron. Yeah, they would have to, yeah.
Any questions? Commissioner Shara.
Good morning. Just a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Speak in your mic, please.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to wear that mic. Just a little bit, a follow-on to Joe's questions. And I did have a chance to come out and look at your property and understand the nature and feel of the area as well as the community itself. And we've been there in the past as well for personal business. So first question on the parking. Clearly, you cannot park on the road, you cannot park in the county right away. There was a picture in the report that showed a boat trailer parked in the county right away.
Yes.
Second is the parking spots you have now require you to pull in, face into your store, but then they have to back out on the road. So again, it's been pointed out that that's not acceptable. It's not in our position to say what you should do, but there is sufficient property there that you could create a parking lot, but that would have to be worked through the permit. So I'm not giving advice, but I'm just simply saying the parking arrangements that are there now that I could observe, as Joe had pointed out, were in a report are not acceptable. And tell me again, when I read the report, it wasn't clear to me, what is the business purpose?
Currently today, it's a bait and tackle shop. We sell bait supplies. We have a small convenience store section for people to be able to purchase items to take out with them, fishing, beer and wine. We have souvenir type items, T-shirts, things like that people might want. A lot of it's geared towards that. Originally, the purpose of that was to also offer the ability for various boat captains to be able to pick up passengers. We would help them with booking, fishing, and tours of the area. And so we would like to be able to continue doing that. We do own other commercial properties in the area. And again, like you mentioned, there's definitely room in this part that's considered residential to build a parking lot instead there. And we would have to work with the county to be able to do that.
And we need commercial zoning in order to get permit for the parking to be on those two lots.
Right. As well as, the rentals of the kayaks. A lot of people come to Ozella, they want to, kayak out in that area. We were renting those when we were informed that a bait and tackle shop does not allow the rentals of kayaks. We then pulled those off the property.
Understand, thank you.
Yeah.
The building itself, the main building, is permitted and licensed for a bait and tackle shop.
Yes.
All right, any other questions by the commissioners? Commissioner Gilbert.
Good morning. When you say that you guys wanted to rent the kayaks out, where necessarily would they launch from, I guess? then?
Originally, they were launching from that ramp. Because we cannot do, we weren't using that, our thought, we would allow them to take those kayaks and be able to launch them then over at John Brown or over at the other
I don't
launch
know.
at the end of
Yeah.
the trail. I can't remember the name of it. I was born here in Crystal River. I've been here 49 years, so I'm like trying to remember everything myself. I can't.
Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Worthington.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, it does indicate on the site plan that your kayak launch is off of your wood dock.
Yes,
Is-
that's correct.
But they're not actually, they're gonna
We,
take,
no, we would prefer if we were able to get this approved. Currently, I thought the question was what we were wanting. We would like for people to be able to launch them off the wood dock. We do have steps that go down into the waterway there. There is actually a kayak tunnel that goes underneath Waterman to be able to get out to the St. Martin. So that way it's not, and I have like little maps that people have asked for in the past that will show that so that they're not going by some of the more bigger areas like the other marina at the end of the road where they might have more boat traffic that they would have to navigate through.
very good, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthington. Anyone else? That leaves me. I do have a question concerning stormwater. Technical Service Division says that your stormwater needs to be provided for the unpermitted improvements and for any improvements in accordance to the LDC Section 6300. What is your intentions mainly for the unpermitted improvements?
We're dealing with Michael Wilburn at Local Engineering. He's actually the one that helped us with the PUD drawing that's here. And in the event that we do get the correct zoning, we will have to do whatever is required to get the permit. And at that time, we will have stormwater addressed with Local Engineering, Michael Wilburn.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Now if we get the staff to come forward for the staff presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's just going to be me today. So this
Yay.
application, this application is an extension of one that was heard previously. I believe it was last year, June 15th of 2023. I apologize. I think the staff report says 24. At that time, the applicant was requesting, and do we have the clicker? I won't be able to show you my slides. The applicant was requesting to change the land use on the two southern parcels to Coastal Lake Commercial, and the northern parcel, which is 26F, was not part of the application. The Planning and Development Commission did review the application, recommended denial to the Board of County Commissioners of that application, and after that, the applicant decided to come back with a planned unit development. So that's what you're seeing today. They are incorporating that northern lot with the existing bait house. It does have a valid non-conforming use from 2001 to allow for that bait house. And so here you can see this is what the existing land use is right now for the three lots, and this is what they're proposing. This would allow them to make non-residential improvements on the other two vacant parcels. And so here you can see this is the master plan that was submitted. As Ms. McKenzie stated, the request is to allow for the continuance of the bait and tackle shop, as well as to allow for a kayak launch and to allow for loading and unloading of passengers for, like boat charters and things like that. They are also showing that the existing shed that was unpermitted on the site has been removed. With the master plan, there are still some questions or concerns. They didn't address landscaping buffers. Typically when we have an improvement to a commercial property, they have to bring it up to code with landscaping. They didn't show anything on the plan, so any improvement they do make on the site will have to provide some landscape buffers. Another one is one that I addressed, which is the on-street parking. They do have an existing on-street parking area that Technical Services has indicated is going to have to be removed. And so they didn't show any new parking, but it appears that they have at least some room there to add an off-street parking lot for the public to use. And also the existing boat ramp, it was a residential boat ramp. The comprehensive plan states that we can't have new commercial boat ramps in the manatee protected habitat. If it's for non-motorized vessels, I know that was one of the concerns that Ms. McKenzie stated. For non-motorized vessels, yeah, they can have the kayak launch. The manatee protection element is basically for motorized vessels. So as long as they don't have boats with motors launching in this area, then they can have the kayak launch. So, and while concurrency has not been demonstrated, the improvements to site are basically just continuing what they have right now with the kayak launch and the loading and unloading of passengers. And so they will have to demonstrate concurrency at time of permitting, that they're going to be able to meet any water and sewer upgrades that may be required at that time. So we do have suggested conditions, and I believe we also have public input, and it was also public input from the previous application.
Thank you, Joe. Does the applicant have any questions for staff?
No, sir, thank you.
Does the board have any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
Joe, regarding the parking, if we were inclined to approve the application, I see here we already have a condition that at the time of permitting, they would have to meet the LDC. So wouldn't that condition suffice for them to add the parking that's required to meet the code?
Yes, so condition 6 of the suggested condition says that parking shall be provided meeting the requirements of section 7240 with access approved by technical services. One of the other comments that was provided to us was that the apron for the boat ramp, I guess, didn't meet commercial or didn't meet minimum standards for an apron on a county roadway, so they would have to upgrade that apron. This condition requires that any improvements they make to that apron or to parking is going to have to be approved by technical services.
Okay. And even though the zoning is changing, they've submitted a master plan. So, they're not only testifying to the fact that there's going to be no additional development, but that also that's what their plan says. So we wouldn't have to be concerned with changing the zoning that, they could put anything on there because they're held to the plan.
Correct. So the suggested condition 1 says that it will allow for the bait and tackle shop, kayak launch, and loading and unloading of boat tours as outlined on that master plan. So any further use or any expansion would have to come back and revise that master plan.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthington. Any other questions by the board?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Shara.
Morning, Joe. So just for clarification, the issues that have been raised and are referenced in the conditions must be met, if this would be approved as condition, must be met before they would be able to get the necessary permits to move forward.
Correct.
The issues in parking, buffering, if it turns out water runoff from any potential parking, all those issues would go through the technical services group and be reviewed and approved.
Yes, they would have to do that as part of their permits.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shara. Joe, I do have a question. I actually got a couple questions. One of the questions has to do with the existing code violations that's on the property. By us approving this, if we are inclined to do so, would that relieve them of the code violations and the concerns of that?
I believe some of the code violations have been abated. I know some of them were for unpermitted uses, such as the unpermitted shed, and I think they had a food truck on site at one time. Those have been abated, but the other unpermitted uses, like the kayak launch and the loading and unloading of passengers, this would give them the ability to then permit those uses, which would abate those code cases.
All right. Then my next question is kind of touch on what Commissioner Worthington was talking about the boat ramp. Since if we were to approve this, they're inclined that it would be a commercial boat ramp. But they're gonna be using it, their testimony, as a residential personal use. Is that something that's allowed with this application? Fenced or
So-
not fenced?
The conditions of approval, the suggested conditions don't mention fencing. It just basically says the existing boat ramp cannot be used for commercial purposes for motorized watercraft. Because the way the comprehensive plan is written in the manatee protection element, it basically talks to motorized watercraft. And so they won't be able to use it for commercial purposes for motorized watercraft. So how they prohibit that is not clear.
But their personal watercraft can be motorized, is what you're saying?
If it's residential personal watercraft, as long as it's not used for a commercial purpose, in other words, they can't run their own boat rentals and launch those there.
Right.
But if the owner decided he wanted to go fishing and he wanted to launch his own boat, it's possible.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe.
Mhm.
Any other questions for staff? All right, seeing none.
Since
Go ahead, Commissioner Facemeyer.
just triggered my thought process. Joe, can you explain your understanding of how kayaks would be launched? Now, I understand that we're not going to use the existing ramp for commercial purposes. We're just going to drop them into water. I'm not a kayaker, so I don't understand how that happens, but can you just share your understanding?
My understanding is there's multiple ways to launch kayaks. I've seen people launch them from normal boat ramps. I've seen people launch them from docking structures. So there's different ways it can be done.
So it's possible to launch a kayak without using that existing ramp?
Correct.
May I
Thank you.
add a little bit to that?
Yeah, please speak into the mic. Thank you.
If you've ever tried to get into a kayak from a dock in deep water,
Can you look at me? Look at me.
if you've ever tried to get into a kayak on a dock in deep water, it's real difficult to do. And even worse, it's even harder to get out of one without ending up in a drink. Because the problem is you can't get your feet underneath you to stand up, okay, like you can with a canoe.
Yeah.
So I can almost guarantee you that every kayak they launch off of there is going to be done from that boat ramp, okay? Because you can step into it, you can shove off, you can come back in, you can step out of it but with deep water, it's pretty tricky. There's a couple of ways to do it, but I'm sure nobody here is interested.
With all due respect, we did ask the applicant, and they testified that they would be launching them from the dock and that there were steps that went down into the water. So while your hypothetical analysis is interesting, they testified to something totally different.
But is my understanding that our discussion here that kayak launching from the boat ramp is permissible, even if it's commercial. Is that correct? It's not watercraft. I mean, not motorized, right?
So the condition reads that they cannot use that boat ramp for motorized watercraft.
Right. So it
So
could.
they can use the boat ramp, the existing ramp.
Kayak launches, as long as they're not motorized, which I know kayaks are evolving, as long as it's not a motorized vessel, then they're not prohibited per the manatee protection element of the comprehensive plan. And so this request is to allow for kayak launches. They did state it's off the dock, but that's one of the uses they're requesting. We could maybe try to
So-
clarify that condition.
So it's my understanding, based on what you just said, that they would be able to use the existing boat ramp to launch kayaks.
Typically, yes. But this is a PUD, so if the board wishes to prohibit that or allow that, we could make that clear in the conditions.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Shara.
Joe, my understanding is that they're not requesting permission to launch kayaks from that boat ramp. They made a comment in a presentation that they would either launch from the dock or from another location, that they would locate the kayaks at another location. So I think we need to clarify specifically what the intent is, so there's no question.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Worthington.
Joe, if it's permitted for them to use that boat ramp, why is this an issue?
Well, that boat ramp was a residential boat ramp.
Okay, but if they're permitted to use it to launch kayaks, why is the county bringing up an issue with the boat ramp?
They currently do not have approval to launch kayaks from this site. That's part of this PUD.
But you raised, or staff raised, whoever raised an issue with the boat ramp, but were there discussions between staff and the applicant about the boat ramp at all?
We let them know that it could not be used for commercial purposes for motorized vessels because that violates the comprehensive plan.
But kayaks are fine.
Kayaks can be launched if the use of a kayak rental and launch is allowed. Kayak launches do not violate the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
But to touch on that, is a personal launch or a kayak, or is it a commercial, there's renting kayaks? So what, would that make a difference?
Well, the applicant stated that it was to be used for personal purposes in their submittal.
But we're discussing using launching kayaks from that dock. Should even be part of the question or conversation, should it? If they're not going to use it, they can't use it. And it should be specifically stated in the conditions that that's not what it's for, as to their testimony, right?
Right, and we can clarify that in the conditions, because as I stated, the condition says the boat ramp cannot be used for commercial purposes of motorized watercraft. So if we want to say also kayak launching, we can include that in that condition, or if you want to allow kayak launching there, we can clarify that in the conditions. But the applicant stated that the boat ramp is to be used for personal purposes.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Joe. Okay, at this time, the public portion of the meeting will now be open. If there is anyone present who would like to speak on this application, please come forward to the podium. As a reminder, an individual has 3 minutes, an organization has 5 minutes. When speaking on this application, please address the board. If you have any documentation that you want to enter into record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary.
The only document I have is what I was sent as the notice, which is the map up there too, which shows the property. So, do I have to give this to somebody? No, okay.
Yep.
This is just what's been up there on the graph before. I am Catherine Blondell, 2151 South Hunt Point, Crystal River. So that means that I own lots 202 and 203. I've owned them since 1993. And I was aware of the fact I did not build and live there until 2013. But this has always been a residential area. This is my home. And I really, really object to the idea of it being commercial property. I have no objections to the Finleys. They are nice neighbors. They have cleaned it up nicely. But I don't know what will happen when they no longer own it. And if it's commercial property, then I'm really concerned on what that would do to my lifestyle and my living, since that is my home and it has been my land since 1993. So I respectfully submit that it stay residential, just because who knows what will happen in the future. Ozella is a different, unique area. It's different because we don't have all the fancy roadways. We don't have all the fancy sidewalks or anything like that. We are the old Florida. So the more commercial it gets, the less we stay the way we are. Just recently, they allowed to put in a glamping campground out in Ozella, and that was fought because we don't want it in our neighborhood. We don't want a lot of commercial property out there. It is low country neighborhood, and I respectfully submit that I want it to stay residential, especially for me. It affects me directly because I am the one right across from that canal that owns that land. I have no problem if they use that dock for kayak entry. That would not bother me at all. But if it has to be zoned commercial to do that, then I object. But launching kayaks, no problem. However, I do object if there's ever airboats being launched there, because there have been personal airboats that have been in there. When they try to put their boats back on, it sprays all the way over my house, all the way up to my deck, because I'm like 16 feet high. That water will come all the way up on my deck and get that salt water all over my deck. So I don't, but again, kayaks can't do that. So since mine is home and it is residential property, I submit that please consider the idea that that's my home and I wish it to remain residential, for the impact that it would have in the future, perhaps when somebody besides the Finleys own it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak on this application? Anyone? Does the applicant have a rebuttal from public input?
Hi, it's Melissa again. I just wanted to, on the code compliance, code complaint, we actually did fix all that, and we are no longer under any violations. To my knowledge, unless a new one has been submitted in the last couple of days. We were here just a few weeks ago to finalize that meeting.
Thank you.
And then I would like to bring up a couple of points, and I do understand the residents' concerns. Once this is granted and we go for permitting, there would have to be buffering. There would have to be parking, and then we could go for the parking issue. You can't do it now. You can't have commercial parking on residential zone property. Buffering would be in effect, and stormwater. There is no stormwater. This site's been there for 40, 50 years, since 1973. There's no stormwater DRA or any sort of protection at all. So those items would be required at permitting stage. Thank you.
And then on the kayak launches, I think there has been some confusion on that, because originally when we were looking at rezoning these, there's 3 parcels, and we were not asking for the 3rd parcel. We we're going to still push to have those kayaks not launch there. And as well as I'll address the airboat issue you mentioned earlier as well too. So we can definitely understand if we can allow kayaks to launch from that ramp, if this part is zoned to allow that. Otherwise, the plan would be to have the kayaks launching from the ramp using the steps that we put in place.
And a good point is that steps, I'm clumsy too, so getting in and out of a kayak, but the steps for the launching at the wood deck are steps that go down level. A good point about being able to get into them at that point.
And we put those in mainly a lot for those that are handicapped and unable to get in and out of boats easily, especially during our extreme low tides that we might get out in that area.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, the public portion of the hearing is now closed. We're going to bring back the discussion to the commissioners here at the board.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
I'm just going to do a little recap because I know everything was in there, but for the public comment that we had, you discussed not wanting the rezoning because of the commercial, and I understand that. And Ozello is a very unique place, and we want to keep it natural Florida. I think what is the story here is the applicant had a non-conforming use because that business been in operation for many, many years, and they wanted to add to their business, bait and tackle, the ability to launch kayaks, but they weren't allowed to do that in that area under that non-conforming use. So in order to clean up that situation and try to expand their business with kayaks and allow people, visitors, to come in and tour and see the beautiful waters of Ozello, giving them another opportunity, they've come up and asked us for a PUD. And what that is going to do is help to cure some of the non-conforming and all of the older ways that they've been operating, and bring them up to a code and help to make what is there better, not adding anything, because they've submitted to us a plan. So what is now currently operating is what is going to continue to operate. So your concern about that they're going to develop those other 2 properties into another additional business is not what they could do based on the approval today. So I'm inclined to support this application. We can work on the conditions however the board would like to see fit. But I think they have been very amenable and trying to work with the county to make things better and also provide the opportunity for them to have a kayak launch at their business.
Thank you, commercial. Commissioner Worthington. It's been a long morning.
I'm going to support support Commissioner Worthington and her thoughts. I believe that the applicant has expressed that once they get approval for this, they will be then subject to approval by the technical people. And also, they brought up the steps long ago, and I thought it was like just stepped over. The steps were put in for the purpose of launching kayaks for the ease of getting in and out of a kayak. And the boat ramp is already allowed for kayaks for personal use. So I don't see why we're beating a dead horse over this. I will support this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Royce.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Shara.
I too am going to support this, but the member of the public brought up something that's important, and that is that this application is specifically conditioned for the use of kayak rentals in addition to the general store. The resident was concerned about airboats, which have their own nuisance issues in that kind of community with that tight spacing. And I'd propose that there be a condition that this is for, clarify it's for kayaks, not for airboats specifically. Because I think that would solve some of the noise issues and noise abatement issues in the community.
Mr. Shara, one thing in the application, they're also asking for the ability for boat captains to pick up and launch at the existing location. So that may include airboats, and I'm not inclined to prohibit airboats. I don't know if there's a law. I don't know if we can prohibit one type of vessel versus others.
It would just be non-motorized. You can't make a distinction of what type of boat, but just non-motorized.
Well, that would cover it, though.
That would cover
Yes,
it.
non-motorized would cover it.
Okay.
But that would only cover launching, not pulling up to the dock, correct? To pick up people. It's already in the water. It's already launched.
Right, it would not prohibit motorized craft from being in that canal to pick people up.
But do we have jurisdiction over that? We probably don't, do we?
If the PUD is changed to say that they can't have boat captains pick up people from there, then that would prohibit that. But you can't say no airboats. You would just have to say they can launch kayaks, but they can't have commercial boats pick people up from that location.
Well, my comment is that I believe in small businesses. Small businesses ought to be able to exist and to flourish in our communities. However, when that small business potentially imposes significantly on a nearby resident, and given the close proximity in those tight canals, I don't see a condition prohibiting airboats, this being a launching point for airboats in specific, that's overly burdensome.
You can't say airboats.
We
You
cannot
can't, we
say
can't
airboats?
discriminate against airboats, but you can say non-motorized craft or motorized craft.
There's a significant difference between airboats and pontoon boats, for instance.
Yes, but the law does not allow you to discriminate against airboats.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So either you allow all motorized craft or you do not allow any motorized craft.
But if you live on the water, you have to expect that someone's going to show up with a motorboat. I mean, you can't close it off. So, like you say, you can say no motorboats in this canal, but isn't that taking away the water rights?
No,
We
you
can't say
can't,
that.
you can't say.
Well, I'm agreeing you can't say that. I'm being facetious.
Right, the only thing you can do is say they're not allowed to have people picked up
On and off.
or dropped off at that location. That's the only thing you can say. But if you allow people to be picked up or dropped off, then how they are picked up or dropped off is, you can't regulate.
So we can say that they can't be dropped off or picked up from this establishment, this commercial property, but across the canal, a resident can have an airboat discharge passengers and pick them up.
for residential, there's a difference between commercial picking up and dropping off
That's
and
what I'm saying.
residential picking
That's what
up
I'm
and
saying.
dropping off.
So you can legislate, or you can say, you can't do it on this side of the canal, but the other side of the canal, if I got a house, I can discharge and pick up passengers.
For residential purposes,
Yeah.
as compared to commercial purposes.
Doesn't that seem sort of,
Mr. Royce, I don't think it matters. I'm not inclined to support that change at all
Neither am
anyway.
I.
Okay, so,
that's why I'm saying that. I
Yeah.
don't support it.
All right, any other comments from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I admit that the applicant has made a good faith effort to improve their lot, but it's still an encroachment in a residential area by a commercial entity. I don't think we should be approving that, particularly in places as ecologically sensitive as the Zello Keys. So I will not support this.
All right, Commissioner Gilbert.
I'm actually to agree with my colleague at the end there. I don't think I will be supporting this. I understand that the applicant has good faith and trying to fix everything. However, I fear the size of the canal, the size of the parking, and what happens when you start ramping up the amount of traffic in that canal and on that roadway. I'm on the Inverness side where I live, and I go out to Henderson a lot. I have a pontoon on a canal, and when multiple vessels are coming in and out, it gets tight. It really does. That canal, I believe, is just a little bit bigger than the one I'm normally accustomed to, but I can still see a lot of issues making it more commercial than it already is. So for that purpose, I'm not supporting this.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilbert. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shara.
I would only support this if this is, and it's not the changing of the classification from CL to CLC. It is if it's for this, the specific purpose of kayak launching and to operating their business. I would not support it if it includes motorized vehicle or motorized craft.
Thank you, Commissioner Shara. Anyone else? I'd just like to say I am on the fence on this. Part of me tells me no, and the other part tells me yes. And I'll tell you what tells me no is the commercial activity, the residential neighborhood. I've been in there many, many times. It is very tight, as Commissioner Gilbert said. The airboats, I'm not against airboats. I own one, so I'm not against them. That's just, to me, it's not a place for an airboat. And the tours that they provide down there, is a moneymaker. And I respect that because it's a small business. The parts that I don't understand is the things that we don't see and understand, the parking, the stormwater, the things that has not been addressed. The Ozella water was addressed. The septic was verbally from advance, but nothing in writing from them about the septic. So I have concerns with things that are short on this proposal. So like I said, I'm on the fence and just looking for a motion or somebody to change my mind one way or the other.
well, Mr. Chair, I would just like to say about the concurrency specifically, that would have to be met at time of permitting. And once again, they're not increasing any capacity because, they're just talking about people coming in, renting a kayak, getting in the kayak and leaving, or getting on a boat and leaving the facility. It's not increasing. And I think that I'm looking at this like we are drastically creating new business here where it is simply a tourism type opportunity where people will come and launch from that facility.
Excuse me. Didn't we hear some comments to the fact that commercial vehicles could pick up passengers from the dock, not from the launch, or not from the ramp. I don't know how much commercial type traffic, marine traffic comes in and out of there now, or how much would be in the future. That's an unknown. I'm like the chairman, I'm really on the fence on this one.
So, here's where I'm at with that. If we're chartering boats out of here, or guides, right? And me and my family we're gonna park somewhere, right? We're gonna get on that boat. We're gonna go explore Ozello. We're gonna come back to this dock. Then we're gonna get off in my car and then go home, do whatever. Again, if this company isn't the one renting the boats out, but they say we have a point to do it, if I'm a small business owner, tour guide, I'm gonna call them first, right? And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna use your dock because I don't have to own a property. So I figure that a lot of tour guides would be wanting to use this, and that would ramp up the commercial side of the traffic. That's what I fear. And I fear that, like, when we have, say, 4 tour guides, right, whether they're pontoons or airboats, whatever they may be, 4 tour guides now use this pickup spot. That's 4 new cars, 4 sets of families, or whoever's experiencing whatever, not to mention the people that are coming to rent the canoe, park here, launch, enjoy, and then come back and turn in the canoe. That's the part I'm worried about. I'm worried we're going to make a bunch of congestion in this area. Not so much of like taking the kayak, going to another location, and then bringing it back, but more or less, again, dropping in here, experiencing, and then coming right back to this spot, almost making it a hub, right? Which again, I like the model. I just think the area is too tight for it. If that's my counter argument, I guess.
Well, I would just say that the parking would be limited, so there would only be so many cars that could park there, and then, you know, what are they gonna do? Get
Exactly,
an
where they're
Uber to there, and then, you know, get on the boat, and then come back, and.
The
That's why I
parking
fear
hasn't
that-
been addressed, though. I mean, we don't know how many parking places they can have. We don't know. The requirements is section 7240, but it just says if they don't permit anything, then they can, where's parking at?
I think the applicant stated that once this was approved and they were allowed to make this a commercial property, then they would be subject to permitting issues about parking and water runoff and DRAs and all of that, whereas right now they're not. So,
But my fear is we can approve this right now, and they can continue to run the business the way that they're running it without having to come back to get any of these other permits. Is that my understanding correct, Joe? Or can you help us on
Well,
that?
they're gonna, my question is, if they show no parking on their PUD, how can they add parking without coming back before you and amending their PUD? I don't know how that happens, because normally when you have a PUD, it describes where the parking is, how many
Exactly.
spaces, impervious, you know, those types of things. I'm not seeing any parking on the plan. So I would think they'd have to come back to amend the PUD if they want to add parking spaces. But Joe says that there's a condition that says they have to comply with the code. But it's not drawn.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
Condition number 6 says the parking shall be provided, meeting the requirements of section 7240 with excess approval by technical services. But that, again, you're right, it doesn't say how many it doesn't show any parking on there. So-
Can they have accessory parking on the vacant lot without a primary use? Because if they plan to put the parking on that lower lot, there's no primary use on that lower lot. So can they have a commercial parking lot on a vacant lot with no primary use?
If all 3 lots are used as a commercial project, then they could utilize those parcels for improvements for the commercial, as long as they met land development code and got them permitted and all that kind of stuff.
And if it's not drawn on there, how is staff gonna know where they're allowed to put the parking?
I don't know how to answer that because we don't have any details as to how they would meet parking requirements. So I don't know how much parking they need. I don't know if they're gonna be able to meet throat distance and things like that.
I understand bringing a PUD, because generally, it's very difficult to get a zoning change without a PUD. But but a PUD needs to be at least expressive enough to know where stuff is, because a PUD in name only, it still doesn't help know where the
Mr.
stuff is
Chair.
gonna be. But y'all
Mr.
can
Chair.
And that's
figure
why
that
I'm on
out.
the fence.
Mr. Chair, The way I see it, this board could deny this PUD now, and the applicant would then have time to make whatever adjustments they need to make for the BOCC, or the applicant could ask for a continuance, but it doesn't look like we have enough support for approval, so I'm willing to make the motion.
For purpose of a motion, Commissioner Worthington.
Planning and Development Commission finds application number CPA/AA/PUD 2024-00016 inconsistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and the Citrus County Land Development Code, and that this board recommends denial of the application to the Board of County Commissioners based on, keep going, ladies? Based,
Chair, can we have a minute, please?
You're going as slow as you could.
That's good pace. That's good pace.
can you say that into the microphone, Ms. McKenzie?
I would like to respectfully.
Please come to the microphone. Thank you.
I would like to respectfully request to continue this so we can bring a PUD back, even though our engineer stated that this would be adequate to submit. And I do feel like one of the conditions was that the items that we're asking about, parking and et cetera, would be on that permitting stage. And that staff would be the one that would review the parking and the buffering. But if it would be more comfortable, then I respectfully request to continue it.
Motion to continue.
Okay, well, what was, I'm sorry. So, there was a motion.
I didn't
To-
finish it,
Oh,
and nobody voted on it.
sorry, I was,
Thank you, Madam Attorney. So we have a motion to continue by Commissioner Worthington, a second to continue by
Second.
Commissioner Royce. All in favor for continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Your continuance has been granted. Thank you. All right, now it's time for application number CPA AAPUD -2024-00012. If, for Mr. Pigeon, if we get a staff introduction
Thank you.
for.
Chuck Pigeon for Crystal Ridge Commercial Group LLC. This request is to change the future land use map, the LDC Atlas map, and establish a PUD on 57 acres to allow for various residential and commercial uses. This is an aerial view of the subject property. This is a view of the subject property from South Rock Crusher Road. This is looking north on South Rock Crusher Road. This is looking south on South Rock Crusher Road. This is looking across South Rock Crusher Road. This is the view of the subject property from West Seven Rivers Drive. This is looking west on West Seven Rivers Drive. This is looking east on West Seven Rivers Drive. This is looking west on Seven Rivers Drive. This is the generalized master plan as submitted by the applicant. And this is the more detailed master plan as submitted by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. Excuse me. Good morning, board and staff. My name is James Dix, Lake Mary, Florida. I am the applicant, and I'll just take a few minutes of your time, just kind of give you a background of the project, and then I have my engineer here that has a presentation. In the interest of respect to your time, I asked him to be a little more brief on his presentation. I think there's a lot of slides, So I think we would just divert to further questions you may have if he doesn't answer every question on every slide for you, and then obviously rebuttal. But this project is across the street of an already approved project called Crystal Ridge. It's about 957 single-family detached homes. It's already started for construction, or I believe like any day now. And we've been working on this for about 2 years in conjunction with Crystal Ridge. And so the concept had always been that this was the continuation of Crystal Ridge going to the west. At one time, we had the property to the west of us under contract, about 536 acres. That is now under contract by somebody else. I'm assuming doing something similar. But really, the idea and thought of this project was to be harmonious with the school to the south of us. And I know that our engineer and well, actually, I think it's Chuck and Chuck have had many conversations. We appreciate that. And the thought behind this project was walkability. So this isn't just jamming in a bunch of single-family detached homes with no thought of what the project's going to look and feel like. And you'll notice that in your packet you have some renderings specifically as to what this project will look like. And that goes from the multi-purpose sports fields, which are a continuation of the amenity package from across the street. And then you'll also notice that there's some single-family detached homes on the north side and also some townhomes. And those townhomes are what we call T&D, traditional neighborhood design. It's a little bit different than what you would normally see throughout Citrus County. And the idea was to create a neighborhood environment that I'm used to doing a lot in some different counties, but it's a normal townhome, but the parking's in the rear. And what that allows you to do is, to come out, sit on your front porch, see your neighbors, get out, walk around the community, and not really have to worry about all of the cars in the front lot, in the driveway, and so forth. So it's going to be a great experience for people that are living in there. The whole idea for the concept here is that people are going to be able to move in here and stay in this area for a long period of time, meaning they can come in here with elementary age children and they can start, let's say that they just want to get in and have some affordability and maybe move into a multifamily, which, by the way, the multifamily project will probably take about 3 to 4 years to build. It takes over a year just to get the permits. But then you can go essentially through your life cycle from, let's say, multifamily to your first home, which is a townhome, into maybe your single-family home, all in the same community. You'll see a very small program of commercial retail there. Those are just some small shops, professional office type stuff, maybe a small grocery. Not really sure. I mean, there's enough space for that. And so I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them as we go through the presentation. But I think I've done this now a few times. So I go back, contrary to what anybody would believe, and I watch everything over again. And I learn from all those objections, and I try to make sure I answer those objections for the next project that I bring through. And I do that, one, because I do care about the community, and two, I also respect your time. I mean, I appreciate what you do. I wouldn't want to do it. I can only imagine. I mean, I see some of the books. I don't know how much time it takes to read for every one of these. So I just feel that it's my responsibility to provide the most complete package that you see. And so I think we have that for this project. And Chuck will come up here and explain a little bit more to that. I'm certainly looking forward to your approval and answering any questions that you may have as we go forward. Thank you.
Good morning. Chuck Pigeon, professional engineer, state of Florida, business address 925 Southeast 17th Avenue in Ocala, Florida, street in Ocala, Florida. And appreciate the time this morning, and I know all of you do a lot of due diligence, review, maybe site visits, and study the information given. And we put together a pretty comprehensive presentation package, mainly to answer any questions you or anyone else may have that wants to review it. So I'm going to take a real brief synopsis of this, but I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on any of the slides. So next, do we push the go button? So we were just going to go through a presentation and try to basically give you a summary. This is the aerial view of the site. If you're familiar with it, I want to point out the Crystal Ridge property that's already been approved. Mr. Dix mentioned the 950 home sites on that east side of Rock Crusher. This is on the west side of Rock Crusher itself, south of Crystal Oaks Drive. Again, just an aerial view. I want to point out here that it's undeveloped property. This slide is presented just to present that the Board of County Commission has already approved and recognized this community as a community development district. That's been approved as a community development district. This particular 60-acre property is part of that community development district and approved as an expansion. Should this be approved, should this project be able to go forward over time, it's already part of that district. So as opposed to a homeowners association or a commercial property owners association, this is a community development district, which if you're familiar with is more of a self-governing, like a souped-up property owner association.
Can we ask a question about that?
Not at this time, Commissioner Dixon.
Just pointing out the existing zoning that's out there and the uses in the area. Most of it is low-density residential or low-density residential mobile home. Immediately to the south is the school property, which is public and semi-public institutional property. So a portion of this property right now, approximately 15 acres, is public, semi-public, institutional. The balance of it is low-density residential. And again, it's allowed for mobile homes. And on that property, we're allowed a pretty substantial number of mobile homes on the property as it currently is zoned. The land use change is to take the 60 acres and basically cut it into four quadrants. One quadrant being the traditional single-family residential detached homes, and we'll go into more detail of that in a minute. Part of it is some general commercial, which is a commercial district. Part of that is a recreation district, and then part of it is the high-density residential, which can support some apartments. As staff noted before, we have a generalized overall master plan, which identifies the different use categories. Again, single-family, some general commercial, recreation, and high-density residential. So the standards of those are identified, and we'll go into more detail of that. But the single-family, between 60 detached traditional single-family homes, 40 what's referred to as T&D, as Mr. Dix mentioned, which is a more hybrid, modern, more somewhat urbanized experience of housing. The recreation HDR, which is a 20 unit per acre density allowed by code. The single family is a 6 unit per acre allowed by code. Commercial is what would fit. We have about 65,000. If it's completely built out, we could support about 65,000 square feet of commercial type activity on about, I think it's 8.5 acres. And then the recreation, which is also about 8.5 acres. I won't go into the detail of the comprehensive plan compliance, but we did look for consistency of the comprehensive plan, and on a number of objectives of the comprehensive plan, this project meets those objectives. A couple of, just point out, it's the open space. We got a lot of open space on this project. It's a planned area where you have multi-use, and they're all consistent in terms of walkability, in terms of the community connectivity, in terms of traffic impact, traffic calming, and maintaining things within the area. From a standpoint of mixed-use development, this is taking that mixed use, but making sure it's put in a proper location where it doesn't impact the adjacent properties. Again, staff had mentioned and the more detailed plan. This one shows the features of the property, the arrangement of the multifamily to the south, adjacent to the school property. We show the activities of the recreation, which is adjacent to future land to the west or to the south. Also provides that location for after-school activities. What's envisioned is things perhaps like soccer practice or Pee Wee football practice or activities after school. They don't have to travel very far. After mom and dad picks them up, they just go over to the little practice next door, or they can even walk, on the sidewalks to get there, but most likely just drive. So in the middle, the pinker salmon color area is traditional T&D home sites. That's set up a little more grid style and set up where it looks more like a little city street with the homes facing the road. And we get some photos of that. And to the north, where it would be up against the low development residential, the northern area is the traditional single-family detached homes with 120-foot deep lots. So you got lots of backyard, pretty good front yard, and a decent-sized house home could sit on that one. But that one does have the garages in the front, or maybe side entry garage. But basically, the entrance with the garage to the traditional single-family would be to the front, where the T&D home sites, garages, driveways, trash receptacles, mailboxes are all behind the house. You cannot see them from the street, and therefore it makes the streetscape quite an enjoyable experience. This is a southern view from the school side looking north. Again, what we envision this to be similar looking like when it's built. We see the feature of the roundabout in the middle. Then you can spur to the residential or go into the commercial site or go into your apartment complex or walk your little city feeling streets in the T&D area and walk from there right over to the little commercial center. Or in the single family, same thing, you can either walk or come in. This community is not set up for golf carts particularly. Whether the county ever wants to approve golf carts on private streets is another thing to maybe consider in the future, but it's not really a golf cart community. It's a walking community. Again, this is from the west looking east toward Rock Crusher Canyon itself. Sports fields, residential homes. We've developed in some little unique features of the where you could turn around at the end of the streets with your cul-de-sacs. Just go into more detail of just the town center itself. Skip this slide. I mean, it's consistent with the Land Development Code, with the exception of a few minor things we'll talk about. Again, this is just a westward view. Once again, you can see more of the detail of the commercial. You see the sidewalks along Rock Crusher Road going to the school. So into the residential itself, 50-foot wide road right-of-ways with 20-foot wide roadways, curb and gutter streets, 4-foot sidewalks on either side, continuous sidewalks. We'd like a little modified cul-de-sac design, but the key features here would be that we'd have 20-foot front setbacks and talk to staff about 65% impervious of the area. The other residential component to this being the traditional T&D homes, the only thing we ask for is a little bit higher to 65% on the lot itself. We originally requested 70 because of a little more compact site. Staff has asked we keep it at 65, and I believe we could do that. On the T&D, those would be about 4,000 square foot home sites on 40-foot wide lots, but still supports a very nice 30-foot wide home, which most homes are 30 to 35-foot wide anyway. These would be a little bit taller, perhaps 2-story is what they envision. Most would be 2-story as opposed to single. A little photo of the traditional single-family, 2-sided sidewalks on each side of the road. But you can see the driveways are in the front. Most likely the garages are in the front. So we get to the traditional neighborhood design. You see there's no more driveways, no more mailboxes, no more trash cans. So the streets are basically what we're trying to get is a streetscape, walking, enjoyable streetscape. The homes are taller, a little bit wider, but there's still minimum 10-foot separation between homes, which is traditional. A lot more room for landscaping in the front, a lot more friendly. And that's only can be accomplished by moving the homes a little bit closer to the right-of-way to provide bigger backyards and a place to have garages and driveways in the back of the house. Traditional apartment complex, these would be 3-story walk-ups. Not too much more to say. I mean, it's a very affordability and appearance and class within the residential apartment complex area. We have a clubhouse, a playground, an open park area. So it's sort of a self-contained apartment complex, even though they could go to sports fields or go to the commercial or walk around the neighborhood on the sidewalks. The commercial downtown center, again, 65,000 square feet. We envision having to be about 70% of impervious, just because it's commercial. But we tried to set it up where all of the buildings in what would face to the interior, there'd be an interior focal point of that. We'd be buffered along Rock Crusher Road, but you would not be looking at business fronting on Rock Crusher Road. The businesses would front the interior, trying to keep it as a smaller community niche for services, like barbershops or perhaps just short, small stores, and again, perhaps a small grocery chain store. When you look at this here compared to where the shopping would be from this site, you got to go all the way down Gulf to Lakes Highway, almost to Publix over at State Road 44 or 486 intersection. Or you've got to go all the way over to Homosassa. So this area would be more of a local neighborhood commercial center. Sports, I already talked about sports, so I'm just kind of skip over this a little bit, but it would be supported with a maintenance facility and parking. If the community wanted an event out there, or if, let's say, it was a Saturday football peewee, plenty of place for people to park and enjoy the day. We did do a comprehensive, detailed traffic operations study, and in that study, we looked at roadway capacity, traffic signals, existing conditions, the future conditions, all turning movements and turning improvements, as well as signal timing at Rock Crusher and Crystal Oaks Drive. The results of that essentially is that all streets and all left turns leaving the streets operate at level of service A. All the minor streets, which would be like some minor roads maybe from the east out of Rock Crusher, or would operate at a level of service C, which is the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan minimum level of service. So we meet that code. We do produce some AM and peak hour traffic. The afternoon, evening traffic is higher than the morning traffic, as expected. But the results are that we meet the Land Development Code concurrency standards. Again, we've got details and 46 pages of calculation information for anyone interested. But the bottom line is the adopted Land Development Code and level of service standards are met in every case for both South Rock Crusher Road, Seven Rivers Drive, West Venable Street, and West Crystal Oaks Drive. What happened here?
Do you want me to move it forward for you?
What is this? I'm fishing it, but it's not moving.
Maybe if you face it that way.
That one?
Just let me know what side you like.
Next slide. I'm just trying to move this along quickly. Just touch base a little bit on the recreation, on the open space components. I provided this exhibit just so you can kind of see the green versus everything else. And including in the single-family residential areas, there's still front lawns, back lawns, yards. I'm not even showing that, but basically this gives you a picture that there's a substantial amount of open space and green area within our planned development. It does include the water retention areas, which predominantly will be dry. I don't believe we're going to have enough to support any of this with an open pond or lake, just because the groundwater table's fairly deep. But there's at least a minimum 20% open space that we're committing to and can easily meet. Next slide, please. Infrastructure. The only thing I want to point out is that we have the internal collector roadways. We have provided the roundabout for traffic calming as well, and that we do have substantial sidewalks and connectivity for both bicycle and pedestrian walking. On Rock Crusher Road, we have turn lanes, both southbound and northbound, planned, not only to support this 60 acres, but also to be consistent with the property to the east, which is the Crystal Ridge property itself. We've also had discussions with Mr. Dixon on the location of future access points to the school. We have looked at how that lines up with our development plan and how that lines up with turn lanes, how that's going to line up with sidewalks. So we are intending to continue that conversation as the school gets further along with their master planning, so that this is consistent with what they're doing, and we can help afford whatever they're doing to try to address their traffic and their high-intensity peak drop-off and pickup hours. Next slide. We're not going to all the detailed staff comments. There's a number of them, and we are in agreement with the staff comments, but there's a little bit of cleanup language that we've asked to consider. And item 3, it talks about the setbacks for the traditional T&D homes. We talked about we needed to move those closer to the street by 10 feet so that we have a bigger backyard and a location for driveway and garage toward the back of the house. Originally, staff had requested 20-foot setbacks, and we explained that we really need to move it to the front to make it a streetscape, to make it the experience of a traditional town center type community. So 10 foot closer to the road, we requested a 10-foot setback in the front. And then as far as setbacks from functional setbacks of a classification of road, the functional setbacks would be from the public county roadways, no problem setting back from Rock Crusher Road, Seven Rivers Drive, but the internal streets are already designed for the size that they need to be, for the width of the right-of-ways that they need to be. Any turn lanes, any sidewalks are already fit. So from a functional setback, we tried to tighten up that T&D center and not have the traditional setback from a center line of a road. So we've just modified that language slightly to understand that it's addressing the public road. Next slide, please. This was comments from the engineering staff itself, and we agree with meeting all the land development code requirements, except we just wanted to clarify that the separation between the main entrance to this development and Seven Rivers Drive is slightly shorter than the by-the-book separation. The code allows a 20% deviation for that. We just wanted to point out that we would need, and that we'd be allowed to use that 20% deviation because they're just a little bit closer. That is to make sure that we can fit the apartments in place and that the roundabout's in the right place and everything can fit. We need to just be a little bit closer. And again, the code allows 20% deviation. We just want to make sure it states that. 11 talks about trees. We're all for trees and landscaping. With the T&D home sites being a little bit 10 foot closer to the road, and the fact that we are trying to get at the affordable type construction where they're 40-foot wide lots, garages and stuff in the back. We've asked on the Land Development Code planting of trees that were allowed. No objection to 2 trees per residential lot, but we would like one of the trees to be in the road right-of-way area outside of the physical owned property, but more of a streetscape tree as opposed to closer to the house. Because we don't want 2 trees right in the front 10-foot yard. We'd like some trees out in the street where it shades the sidewalk and the road itself. So we've added a language, 1 or more trees may be placed in the front of the lot within the right-of-way as a streetscape shade tree. Under the pedestrian connectivity, we just want to clarify what that is. Staff explained what they intended for this, and we wanted to clean it up. That says the sidewalks at the roadway and commercial crossings would be concrete or pavers or bricks as a special emphasis. We were concerned that one might interpret that every sidewalk throughout the entire development was to be concrete, scored concrete, pavers, or brick. And it's really intended that it's just the main crossings. So that's what that cleans up, item 12. Next slide. And I think last but not least, the sidewalks themselves, we are proposing 4-foot sidewalks on each side of the residential streets. 5-foot sidewalks are larger in the commercial areas or along Rock Crusher. The comprehensive plan indicates 4-foot sidewalks if they're on both sides of the road. That's what we're proposing. So again, we're just cleaning up the language. Sidewalks shall be 4 feet wide and installed on both sides of the residential streets. And it says sidewalks shall be a minimum 5 feet wide within the commercial districts and allowed on one side as opposed to both. And again, just to give you a note there that the comprehensive plan allows that. We're all in agreement with staff's proposed conditions if we can make these few little clarifications and edits. So sorry about the long time it took. I'll be glad to answer any questions, go into any details.
Does the staff have any questions for the applicant?
No, sir.
Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
I've got one.
Commissioner
Maybe
Dixon.
Dix, I'm not sure, but, there's a bond.
Speak in your
hearing-
microphone, please.
Sorry. There's a bond hearing scheduled recently for, a $92 million bond. Is that this project, or is that Crystal, the one across the street?
Then the bond covers everything within the CDD district, which
this
is
in the
this
CD?
project and the project across the street, if the CDD district funds 100% of everything. It usually never happens. The CDD district will not fund 100% of all the infrastructure. When you go through the bond hearing, you want to make sure that looking 20 years, everything that may happen, increase of costs, we've got to look at that. So yes, if everything was built, it may be $90 million or more.
Okay, that's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
And does that mean that it's gonna be built out quicker?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
James Hicks wants to speak up.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I've become the resident expert on CDDs and certainly didn't volunteer for that. So community development districts, specifically exactly what you said, we had always contemplated that if we were to get approval, this would be added into the district. So that's the way the district was set up to begin with. We take into account what Chuck just said, my engineer, for every single possible expense in there. And that's what it would cost. It doesn't speed up the project anymore. I mean, quite frankly, from the time that you guys say yes or no, and if you say yes, which we hope you do, you're looking at a year and a half before any dirt gets moved, and that's just from getting the permit process, the ERPs and the ACOEs and stuff. The project's going to be built in phases. It always is, just simply by absorption rate of the actual community. But the amount is accurate. I mean, that is a 90-something million dollar project if everything was built out all the way through. Typically, a CDD only bonds about 50% of that, and that's basically the actual bonding capacity that it would have. And so there's some statutory requirements as to that number. And so we would probably, I mean, I've never, ever done a CDD where we bonded the total amount due. It's usually double the amount.
What's the time period of the bond?
Yeah, so good question. So I mean, I wasn't expecting a bunch of CDD questions, but that's okay. I got the answers, I think. So typically on a CDD, your bonding is going to be about 120 days from the day you have permits in hand to move dirt. We never, ever wait for that. We always, what we do is we do an RFP through the CDD, and then we self-fund that until the bonds actually come through. So it doesn't delay anything that we do. We do try to time it as soon as we can, simply because municipal bond, a bond from a CDD is, 3 times less than any holding cost of any other private money. So it's important to do that, but typically no national builders or developers wait for those funds to come in. They start building immediately, and then when those funds come in, they're reimbursed once the district engineer signs off on the work that's been done.
So that would pay for like the park and the amenities associated with the park, in addition to the roads and the water and the sewer and the lighting?
Yes, sir. So great question, specifically in reference to the CDD. So the way we look at CDDs, and this is a communication that we have with our builders as well, is the funding from the community development district always goes to offsites first, boulevards second, and in that boulevard tranche, that's everything that goes with it. That's the master utilities, that's the sidewalks, that's the landscaping that goes with that boulevard, and then amenities. And after amenities would be any streets that go along with it, off streets like cul-de-sacs or so forth like that. Usually, typically, you won't get to that. The bonding, you won't really exceed any bonding, so you're only going to get those first 3 buckets that I just said. And so that's as fast as you want to be able to bond them. But really, that's not the problem. The problem is the speed of the process, right? So, I mean, we go as fast as we can go through the process. The bonding is always there. we always want to use as much bonding as we possibly can, as fast as we can, just because the interest rates are typical to a municipal bond.
It's interesting that, I mean, I have talked to them about this project. I didn't really realize it was part of the CDD until today, really. But, you know, we have approved TDDs in Citrus County before, but they didn't ever get built because there was no, they were right on Horace Allen over there, that project. I don't know exactly why that didn't happen, but it's interesting. I don't really want to go into the design details because I have my own opinions about that, but they're not really related to my function here as a school board representative.
Happy to have those offline with you, sir.
Yeah, but I am interested in the acceleration of the infrastructure and how that's going to impact our issues over there. And we are doing a master plan for Rock Crusher to add additional entrance and internal traffic flow and some space for additional facilities in light of everything that's going on over there. But
And we could discuss that offline if you want. We're happy to do that, and also have it take into any considerations that you may be having as far as what you want sped up or what you don't want sped up. I mean, we can certainly work as neighbors, but we would work with any other neighbor.
But your timetable for, say, the multifamily part of it, how do you envision that coming about out of the ground? I mean, what are you going to do first? I mean,
Right. And it's a good question. It's certainly valid. I would say that the first thing that happens is going to be the single-family homes. That's the biggest need right now. As far as, you know, again, we don't create the demand, right? As far as my personal opinion, multifamily is desperately needed in this county. We have 2 projects that are, you know, basically 100%, you know, construction, so they're going to start going up pretty quickly. But even if this got approved today, you're talking at least 3 years with no hiccups or nothing slowing it down before you ever saw an apartment there. It takes about 2.5 years to build the apartment from the day you have your permits in hand. And so I don't see us having permits in hand for at least a year, probably a year and a half. And that's, you can be assured, there's nothing I do that's slow. If it's slow, it's not me. It's just the process. So unfortunately, it is a long process, and that process increases the affordability of the overall project because it gets passed on ultimately to the end user.
who do you see living in the traditional neighborhood? What kind of demographic are you going to market that to, or do you know?
Right. So we don't build the vertical, right? And I really only do business with nationals. So it's going to be a national builder. And that market would be, if I had to guess on that product, you're talking probably around the 250 range entry, maybe even slightly a little bit lower. That's why the density matters on some of these. But the way that the county is proceeding and growing, I personally believe that that's going to be first-time families that are coming here. Our ultimate goal would be able to provide those jobs that they need here. I think that the first jobs that are going to come online for those people are going to be school and first responders. And they are in desperate need of affordable, attainable housing. And I think that that product is specifically that. So it's a first-time move-in, and it's a family, probably with kids. If I was moving to this area with kids, I'd be looking for a new product that's going to have a 7-year warranty on it, that I don't have to worry about going and fixing everything that's falling apart. And I want to be able to have my kids living close to the school that they can walk to school. I don't have to go sit in that line, unfortunately, that's on Rock Crusher. And I know that that's going to be resolved with all the great work that you guys are doing. But in the end, I mean, parents want to drop their kids off and pick them up, especially at the elementary level. And so I think that that's who's going to be moving in first, is those young families. We do get a lot of calls on a regular basis. Like when I say regular, I mean every day, for people that want to move into our projects up here. And it ranges anywhere from a new family to actually retirees that have, let's say, lived in maybe Pine Ridge in a 1-acre lot that wants to move down. They don't want a 1-acre lot anymore, and they want to live close to the area. So we actually have a waiting list for pretty much all of our projects right now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Dixon.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
Thank you. There was something about a modified cul-de-sac, but it really didn't go into any detail as to what that meant. Can you tell me what is modified and what is required and what's different?
Yes, I don't know if we can get back to one of the aerial photos. So the traditional cul-de-sac, you get to the end of the road and there's a circle. You got to turn around and come back. In this particular one, at the corner, I'm not sure if one of these points, but you can see toward the corners of the end where it's not the end of the road, but it's a place where emergency vehicles could turn around. Any resident could turn around. So it's not your end of the road. It's more of a modified area where you could still meet all the objectives of the emergency vehicles and local residents. So that's what we're modifying. It's still a 40-foot wide radius for paving. It's just not at the end of the road.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Gilbert.
I saw something about a gated entrance. Where is that gate entrance on here?
Okay, we were just proposing a gate where the apartments.
Sure, thank you. So that's the only gated entrance that would be for this whole development?
Oh, that's not a gate, that's.
That would be an emergency access gate only, constantly
Okay.
closed, automatically opens or breakaway for the fire department. But that's just for an emergency exit only. Apartment complex usually has 2 access points in case one gets used up. That's all that is.
Okay,
This
so
is-
there's no other ones on
This is not
the-
a gated community.
I thought I saw a gated community, that's why I was like, wait a minute,
Right.
where, I don't see
Not,
it.
not a gated community, just
Okay.
an emergency gate.
Just the emergency, okay, thank you. That's all.
Commissioner Shara.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, we have stressed as this board and in my time on the board, the importance of coming forward with a complete and comprehensive plan. And I have to tell you, this is, there's a lot of stuff here, and you're to be applauded for that. A couple questions at a 10,000-foot level. I'll leave the detailed questions to later. First, you mentioned that adjacent across Rock Crusher, you've already have a permitted but not yet platted, or approved but not yet platted Crystal Ridge. And of course, now you're looking to build its companion development. When you look at traffic, when you look at infrastructure, water, wastewater, sewer, are you looking at the combined impact on this region of both communities, or just the community that is in the application?
It's a great question, but absolutely, we look at everything. If we're going to spend $90 million, we want to make sure all the water, sewer, drainage, road intersections, turn lanes, do we need traffic signals? We do look at it all. So the traffic impact analysis study was as if the Crystal Ridge development was completely built out, 900 units, every room, every lot had a house. If this was completely built out, and you know, realistically, very few communities ever get completely built out. There's always a vacant lot or perhaps a missing, but that, the aside, yes, we look at it all. We looked at the water, sewer, roads, drainage, levels of service. We have the capacity letters for water, sewer, solid waste, that they do have sufficient capacity to service this project, as well as Crystal Ridge and anything else that is happening in the area.
Okay, I think we'll come back to wastewater or sanitary sewer after the staff report. When you look at roads, and the condition of roads, in particular West Seven Sister, and there's some detailed commentary in the staff report, and that is not the same type of road, of course, we have in Venable and we have in Rock Crusher. What is your thought related to West Seven Sister?
2 different roads, Seven Rivers as well as Rock Crusher, and it's a good question. Also, we just completed borings, core borings of all up and down Rock Crusher Road to see how thick it was, what condition it was in, what kind of structural capability it has. We have recommendations from the geotechnical engineers as to how to make sure and improve Rock Crusher Road to make sure it's going to handle long-term traffic. On Seven Rivers Drive, we did similar. We realized Seven Rivers Drive from this entrance all the way back to Rock Crusher most likely is going to be completely rebuilt and repaved so that it actually is a much better road section for 25, 30 years.
Is that repaving or rebuilding of that road part of your project?
Yes,
And
it'll be
your
part of
cost?
the improvement plan approval process that the county engineer reviews, and we're proposing. That's why we went and got the core bore samples to show that the structural number and the structural integrity of the road can handle the 25-year traffic.
And that's what we consider a off-site improvement.
Off-site improvements, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All
But
right,
that
thank
really
you.
is triggered with the improvement plan submittal process, and the county engineer looks at it and says, this road, even though today the roads aren't on the list to be paved or repaved, we will have to repave them anyway.
Yeah, and just, you mentioned 25-year. Roads aren't something that we're dealing with in this, in this commission, but I don't believe the 25-year is linking up with the county's, if I recall properly, watching a BOCC meeting with their anticipated life of the roads. But that's something that will be taken up in detail. But my recollection is, projected life is now something more like 50 years.
Well, the 25 years is when you need to repave the road, not rebuild the road. We never rebuild the road in our current thinking. It's when you repave the road. Okay. So roads are built to last 25 years before we have to spend more money on them, other than striping.
Could I ask a clarification question about the CDD? How does that affect your ability to change land uses within the development after the bond is issued? Can you, does it compel you to build what you represent for the bond, or can you can it be changed down the road?
Yeah, so when we actually go into the bonding, we go in exactly with what's approved, and those are called ERUs, and that's the specific type that's in there. So I could change, the single family, and as long as it's still single family. I can change the townhome as long as it's townhome.
But not the
I
commercial.
can't switch them. No, I can't go from commercial to whatever. And typically, what'll happen is the CDD may bond the commercial, but you don't sell a piece of commercial with a CDD assessment on it. So what'll happen is you may bond the CDD for the commercial, and you'll receive bonding proceeds. But when you sell the commercial to the end user, you, the developer or the buyer, will actually pay off that assessment, because assessments don't pass on, they don't perform in a commercial contract. So the long, short answer to your question is no, you can't just go switching, because that's part of the bond. Once the bond's underwritten, those bond assessments are on that many houses that are already approved, and that many square feet of commercial, and that many apartment units.
What about the park?
Well, the park is considered an amenity, so the amenity, are you saying, can I reduce the amenity? I do the clarification.
Can you change that to more apartments?
Not without a zoning change?
Not without the whole zoning change. As far as the CDD goes, there's no assessment put on the park. We use the assessment is put on the number of houses and the commercial and the multifamily. And from that pool of dollars, we make the determination that it's gonna go to off-sites, boulevard and everything that goes along with that, and amenities. Right, and there may be funds left over, and then at that point it goes to side streets and so forth like that. But that's our priority list, to make sure that all gets done, and that's what the bonding proceeds are specifically earmarked to in the very beginning. But as far as the amenity space, whether it was 1 acre, 5 acre, but that doesn't affect the CDD. The CDD is based on this plan. You approve this plan, BOCC approves this plan, this goes into the CDD, and this would be what the bonding capacity is based on.
So the CDD, I'm a little bit familiar with them. We don't have many in this county. I think we have 2, but it has its own board of directors. It has a government agency, and then once a certain point is reached, the developer no longer has control of it, correct?
Yeah, so that's a good statement, and he's specifically talking about the CDD and the board, and that Chuck had kind of alluded to that. It's a glorified HOA, right? Except it's really a municipality. It's treated as a municipality. Sunshine laws, everything applies. Financial disclosures, everything. Typically, if you have a CDD that oversees the community, the majority of the stormwater's in there, everything's in there, and there's always an HOA, but the HOA is minuscule at that point in time. You're actually better off. Now, some people would argue that. I have my own, we won't get into that. It's a long conversation. But with the CDD, you have a very organized board with its own legal, its own engineering, everything that goes along with that.
But the maintenance and everything over time would be the responsibility of the CDD.
Yes, sir. The CDD is responsible for all of the maintenance, the stormwater management system and everything. And it has a lot more leverage and power than a HOA does.
Yes.
It's not like 4 or 5 people are just, hey, I'm the only one on the street that wants to be on the board. No, it's way more organized than that.
So this is kind of like mini villages in Citrus County.
Well, the villages do the exact same thing. They do community development districts, and they have a bunch of them. But yes, sir, similar.
So quick question if we could.
Commissioner Scherer.
So if the CDD is being put in place and underwritten for this entire effort, which is both sides of Rock Crusher, that means you have to put the CDD in place sooner for the Central Ridge than you would for this community. I'm just a little confused for clarification. Is the CDD phased? Or
Yes.
are there portions that are underwritten? And then, in that subscription, then you have a follow-up activity later?
Yes, sir. So good question again. The CDD is already done and approved. I believe we're waiting for the appeal process, which is up in October. There was no appeal, so we're finalized. So the CDD's there. What really you're talking about is actually raising the money for the CDD. That goes in tranches. So I'll give you an example. The first tranche of the CDD, which is already approved, is phase 1 of Crystal Ridge. That's 232 lots. The second tranche is going to be phase 2, 3, and 4 of it, and this would be a fourth tranche because we have to have permits in hand before we can go to the marketplace, and that takes 4 months for the whole process once the permits are in hand. So the CDD for this really won't be in place probably for at least a year. I mean, let me phrase it. The funding, the bond tranche, not the CDD. The CDD is already approved and done.
So phase 1 is 232 units, that's Crystal Ridge?
Yes, sir,
And
phase 1.
That's phase 1, and you mentioned phases 2 through 4.
That's the remainder of Crystal Ridge, and she's gonna pull that up, I think. And that'll be the second tranche, and then the third tranche will be across the street, which is what we're talking about right now.
I'll tell you when to stop.
Yes, sir.
I think it's the very last map in the PowerPoint. It's past the thank you questions. Well, we passed that one more. There you go. This is the overall picture, so you get a better sense. Everything east.
I'm sorry, Chuck, we need you at the mic.
Yep,
I'm
thank you.
I know, it's just,
Everything
since
east of
we're on
Rock Crusher.
YouTube now.
Crystal Ridge. The portion colored to the west is the 60 acres. You can see how they line up. Phase 1 is to the north of that, or to the top
Yes,
of that. That's
correct.
phase 1, 234 lots. That hopefully will be under construction within the next month and a half.
And that's phase 1 of the CDD. That's phase 1 of the CDD.
So this is gonna include the Rock Crusher Canyon, the canyon.
Yes, sir, that's phase 2. That'll be the second tranche. And that would include everything other than what's on the north side of Crystal Oaks.
What are you gonna put there in the actual, what do you envision that being?
So, in reference to Crystal Ridge, which is already approved, everything down at the, down below where the pavilion was, for the amphitheater is all being, kept the way it is, 11 acres of, open space. And, there'll be actually an amenity space down at the bottom by the lake.
So that's included in the $90 million?
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? Madam Attorney.
Can I ask a question? So are you just having, so that's all one CDD, so you're having one board?
Yes, ma'am.
So just for the board, if you can think about, just think of this as a little city. It's gonna have an elected board after the developer is no longer in control. But it's a taxing authority, just like any city, like Crystal River or Inverness. That's gonna be its own, what's it called?
The Crystal Ridge Community Development District.
So it's the city of,
I'm
That's-
sorry, not the original, but.
yeah, I mean, that's just, if you can just think of it that way, the legal framework is its own little city.
All right, any other questions from the commissioners?
I got a little question about, I saw something about a trash compactor.
Yes, that would be for the apartment complex, and the modern thing to do is that the apartment complex is not to have your traditional dumpsters, they just pile up. They compact them, and then the trucks come in and remove it. So everything's contained in a compactor.
It'd be individual, what, for 3 or 4 units, or for a row of apartments, or?
It's one location. It's actually next to the maintenance shop, so it's remote from the buildings. So you walk over with your trash and put it in the trash compactor, and then it'll compact itself so that you don't have a lot of dumpsters all over the place.
Got it. And about parking, those interior streets and the rear streets, is there gonna be parking on either or both of those?
For the traditional T&D home sites, we have 2 different types of streets. One street is on-street parking,
Yeah.
where visitors can park in front and walk to your front door. The other street does not have on-street parking, but it has parking adjacent to it across the street, which is the park, where the recreation park is. So if you had a visitor, they could park at the recreation park and just walk across the street to your house.
Thank you.
All right, my turn. I have just a couple of questions. One, the LDR MH that's on the south and the west side, is all that the school property around where your recreational fields are going to be?
Yes, everything south of this property to the southern end is the school property.
But everything to the west is not?
Everything to the west is open pasture, undeveloped, is not. That's the 500 acres Mr. Dix talked about that somebody else owns.
On your recreational fields and your open space, is there going to be lighting provided?
I'm not 100% sure about the open space lighting. We have not specifically designed any lighting for those ball fields. It was not intended to have lighting. I am not sure that we'll never have lighting.
Okay.
It kind of depends on, I guess, the activities and what the CDD feels in the future. If there's enough activity, do they feel they should put in lights? Then we'd have to come back and request for lighting.
All right, and my next question is, you're saying it's a walking community. I'm just curious, I don't see any sidewalks along Seven Rivers or Rock Crusher on the perimeter of the property. Is there going to be sidewalks provided on the perimeter with walking access into like the commercial district?
It's all interior walking. There is no sidewalks in Seven Rivers. There is sidewalks on Rock Crusher, both sides. We didn't show sidewalks here because the sidewalks are on the Crystal Ridge side, the east side of Rock Crusher. That's part of the Crystal Ridge PUD approvals and conditions. We do have a sidewalk on the west side from the apartments down toward the school so that they can stay on that side of the road and not have to cross the road. But there's no sidewalks in Seven Rivers.
But it doesn't go up to, from Rock Crusher, it don't start at Seven Rivers? It just starts at the multi-housing?
It starts at the main entrance of the development going south. We feel that there wouldn't be people walking
Which is just north of the apartments?
Yes.
South of the commercial?
South of the commercial, yes.
All right, then my next question would be, on your traffic study that you highly praised, and it's very complicated. I went through it 4 or 5 different times, and you probably know what I mean when I say complicated. Did you, or is that the traffic analysis, does that include the Crystal Ridge
Yes,
area?
sir.
As it
Yes, sir.
indicated that it probably didn't?
No, it does include Crystal Ridge traffic. 'Cause
Completely
that's
built
a
out.
background traffic. And one of the things noted in the Crystal Ridge traffic is that the northernmost intersection of the Crystal Ridge as it connects into Crystal Oaks Drive. That's the only intersection that when you make a left turn, it drops from a level service C to a level service D, just because you have to wait a little bit longer for the traffic in the future to be able to make that left turn. So other than that, every other intersection is level of service C for turning movements or better.
All right. Still gray on that a little bit, but I'll get back to that.
Okay.
The next on we know it's the CDD. It's been very well exposed today. The CDD fees, are they going to be applied to the multi-housing? Because you're going to have fees, obviously. CDD has fees for residential, for owned property, but you're not owning the multi-housing. And the
Great
reason I ask
observation,
is,
sir.
you're probably familiar with the Watson Road project that I was part of in Hillsborough County, which almost mirrors this exact same thing. So
No, so it's a good observation. So I should have brought that up when I was, brought up the fact that on the commercial, right, what we do is we consider the multifamily and commercial, and we get bonding on that, but you can't transfer that bonding from commercial and multifamily to the end developer or builder, because it doesn't pencil out. So what happens is we negotiate one way or the other. Either we pay as the seller or the buyer pays, but there is no transferable CDD assessments onto that property for commercial or multifamily.
So when's the negotiation phase happen? After development or before development?
When they come to buy it.
So I mean, the apartment complex.
Yeah, if you say you wanted to buy the apartment complex, you'd come over there, we'd tell you there's an assessment on it, and you say the assessment doesn't work, or we would pay it off, or you would pay it off. And by the way, that goes for any house. In case you don't know, on a CDD, you don't have to be assessed a CDD. The CDD, all that does is allow you to push out the development cost of your house over 25 or 30 years onto your taxes at a low rate. You can walk in and pay it off. Just for an example, you write a check for $25,000 and you have no assessment on your lot for a CDD. If there was no CDD, you would still be paying the same $25,000. So what it does is, in my opinion, in a transient state like ours, it allows you to defer the use of that infrastructure for the time that you're in your house. If you're only in your house for 10 years, you're only paying the use of that infrastructure for 10 years, not 30 years up front if you were to have to pay that up front. So on the same thing for multifamily and commercial, you can't pass on those fees to the owner of the multifamily or the commercial. They're not going to buy it. It won't pencil in. So somebody has to pay it off at closing when they buy that property.
So that brings me to my last question, is CDD versus affordable attainable housing. How can you use the word affordable housing and attainable housing with a CDD fee? I'm confused on that.
Understood. I can see how there's a confusion. So first of all, so it goes in line with what we just said, right? Without a CDD, okay, and let's just use a single family home, okay, for this example. But without a CDD, you're going to pay an extra $25,000 for your home when you buy it. End of story, period. With a CDD, you're not going to pay that $25,000 because it's going to be spread out over 30 years at a low interest rate on your taxes, just like if you had to pay a municipal bond or something that was passed through by the city. All right? And that immediately changes your ability to borrow money. Every $1,000 makes a massive difference on what you qualify. So imagine if you don't have that extra $25,000 to buy your house, right, and there's no CDD, you're not qualified. No way you're getting a loan on that house unless you put another 10 or 15 grand down. So we feel that it definitely creates a better ability to be able to qualify for a home with interest rates at where they're at, and luckily they're going to be coming down. And again, by the way, if you have a problem with the CDD, you can write a check at closing and you don't have to pay that assessment ever.
But the maintenance is separate, right?
The maintenance, right? The maintenance, so you have O&M, right, which is operations and maintenance. So you're going to have that with an HOA, or you're going to have that with a CDD. With an HOA and a CDD, there's typically zero to no fees on the HOA, very minimal, because your O&M is with the CDD. So all your road maintenance, your clubhouses, anything you would have at your normal HOA is actually done by the CDD at the CDD level, right? So it's not an HOA and a CDD. The HOA may be $10 a year, $10 a month, or something to that effect, because they don't really do anything. They're going to be doing architectural review board stuff. So I think that it does allow for affordability, and that's one of the reasons we like CDDs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions by the board? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we'll adjourn back at 15 after 11. seen Joe with his legs crossed, my legs was crossed.
I had already walked up.
I left already. I couldn't.
A country road.
I'm almost done. I was 41. I won't do it anymore.
Me too.
No, my son is a fire chief.
January 25th, actually.
This is, you may have seen it.
I think you've got a lot of energy you want to give there.
Yeah, and that's a lot.
Mike eats well, I can tell you. I've seen Mike before. He's fine. She's doing cooking well.
Yeah, I know. He needs a diet. Someone just went to Target for the first time and he's writing me all these messages about, oh, it's so wonderful.
It is, if you like Target.
Especially the ones in other places, we're about to frequent.
My wife was first in line. My wife was first in line.
No, for this one?
She wasn't first in line because she had my mother-in-law in a wheelchair. So they allowed her to go in first. So my mother-in-law was literally the first person in the Target.
On the night before it opens.
Yeah, like 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock. They went up at 6. Yeah, it was packed.
Special.
Yeah, well, that was your clothes opening.
They let us shop.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that. I thought it was just gonna be, look at the store, get out.
Was that a chamber event? Or?
Right. Not just the chamber.
Yeah.
Are you ready to go so we can get
Yeah,
this?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a financing mechanism.
Welcome back, thank you. I probably should have looked to my right to see if the IT girl was there before I slammed the hammer down, so we can get this staff presentation.
I'm sure we can get it up.
And Kat comes to the rescue.
I was saying, just count to 10. Cat's gonna come running any second now.
How did we ever operate before Kat?
I'm sorry?
No. I was daydreaming.
I'm not sure we ever did.
She does a good job.
For years, we didn't have a cat.
No.
Thank God we have cats.
Yeah, she does a good job.
Back before Clark knew how to use PowerPoint.
Does he know how
He didn't hear
now?
He didn't hear me. Clark, I was making a joke at your expense. You didn't hear me.
It was funny.
It just had to do with you and technology.
Thank you. No, you're good.
You can work a PowerPoint now. It's good.
Yeah, he said, next slide.
I remember being at the law firm when I first started working with Clark, and we got Westlaw, which was the computer research. The partners, Clark and Don Perrin, wanted nothing to do with Westlaw. I know.
All right, you ready there?
I used to say catastrophic data loss was
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. Joe Hockedal, Land Development. So this application is a comp plan amendment with a plan unit development application. My apologies, the title is wrong. Oh, no, this is the next one, Liz, sorry.
Looking for 12, Joe.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, I was like, wait a second, that looks familiar. No, that's the next application.
Oh, I'm all over the place.
I thought I missed something.
Here we go.
Here we go. All right.
Thank you.
So this application is requesting to change the land use on approximately 58 acres. It consists of 2 parcels. It's currently low-density residential and public, semi-public institutional. You can see there is some single-family homes located up here to the north, and then you have, it used to be Rock Crusher RV Park. I don't know what the name of it is now, but there's the existing RV park over here, and then this is the old Rock Crusher Canyon site, which is part of the previously approved Crystal Ridge development. So here you can see the existing land use. It is LDR and PSI. The MDR across the street was part of the Crystal Ridge development. And here is the land use breakdown as proposed by the applicant. The SF, the single family, is low density residential, but they are changing the land use on the other portions to GNC, high density residential, and recreation. And so here you can see the conceptual master plan that they've provided. They are requesting up to 60 single-family detached lots, 40 single-family attached lots, which is the traditional townhome, traditional neighborhood development townhomes, and 300 multifamily lots down there on the southeast corner, with a sports complex and fields in the recreation portion, and up to 65,000 square feet of commercial in the GNC portion here. One thing that the applicant did provide as part of this application, what we don't see all the time, is they actually provided excluded uses as well. So the land development code, based on the land use, there's certain uses that are allowed in each land use. They have actually provided certain land use or certain types of uses that would not be allowed in this development, even though the land use, such as general commercial, would allow it typically. So they did provide those excluded uses. They are proposing 2 access points, main access points, I guess you could say. One of them is on Seven Rivers Drive up here on the north side, between the single-family detached. Then they have the one main off of Rock Crusher Road here. And then, as Mr. Pigeon stated, there is to be an emergency access point down there on Rock Crusher where the multifamily is located. So the project is proposing numerous deviations from land development code requirements. And some of these are just, the land development code isn't set up to accommodate all types of development. And so a lot of the things you would see with the traditional neighborhood development style is not necessarily supported in the land development code. So one of them is parking on street for the single family attached. So that's one deviation. Reduced internal front setbacks, which Mr. Pigeon talked on a little bit, especially with the townhome area. They're pushing the townhomes closer to that internal roadway, which gives them a little more room on the backside where the alley is to be located. But it's a 10-foot setback from that front roadway. And land development code requires typically 25-foot minimum. Increased impervious surface for the residential components. And as Mr. Pigeon stated, they're going to 65% to 70%. The modified cul-de-sac design, which we had some conversation about. Some buffer deviations, which overall it provides adequate buffering, but there is a little deviation there for some buffers. One deviation is the requirement for 2 trees per residential lot. So the land development code requires that each residential lot has to be designed or maintained or planted at least 2 trees. They are requesting a deviation from that to have at least 1 tree on a residential lot, or to be able to put those trees in the streetscaping. They're also requesting reduced sidewalk width of 4 foot. I noticed it in the revised or recommended conditions that he proposed that be for the residential portion, and that the commercial portion would have the 5 foot. Another deviation is to have 3 subdivision identification signs. Typically, land development code says you can have 1 per principal entrance, and so they would have 2 in this case. They would have the one on Seven Rivers and the one on Rock Crusher. And the emergency one on Rock Crusher would not be considered a principal entrance. So per land development code, they would not be allowed a subdivision identification sign at that entrance. And they're also asking for a 10-year expiration to the PUD, which, as you've seen lately, we've seen that a lot with some of these larger developments. So while it seems like a lot of deviations, they're deviations that Mr. Pigeon has indicated support the style of development that they're proposing. They have provided concurrency. They can provide central water and central sewer, although I believe it was central sewer stated there might have to be some improvements made offsite as part of this, which would be between the developer and Citrus County Water Resources. So the project generally is compatible with the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Plan, and we do have suggested conditions. Any questions?
So his modification of the conditions on his PowerPoint, do you have any comments?
Let me go through my notes. So for condition number 3, that's the one that talks about the setbacks. Again, the Land Development Code's not really set up for the T&D style townhomes that they're proposing, so we put 20-foot front setback in there. If the board wants to go with the vision that's proposed by the applicant, we can change that to a 10-foot front. That's really up to this board, which way you want to go on that. We can clarify also number 3, the setbacks from an arterial or collector roadway to be a public county roadway as opposed to the private internal roadways. And then there was one of the bullet points in condition number 10. I got a note on here that's they're requesting, I think it's the 7th bullet point that says any proposed connections to a county roadway must meet separation requirements. I believe the Land Development Code does allow for a 20-foot or 20% deviation with the approval of the county engineer. So I don't know if we have to include that in the condition. It's something that is allowed in the Land Development Code. We can include that in a condition if you wish. The pedestrian connectivity, so the Land Development Code, Section 3740 and 3745, those are our large and small non-res design criteria. For the commercial components, which we would consider the recreation, the multifamily, and the commercial, anytime you have a sidewalk that crosses a VUA, a vehicular use area, so an internal driveway or roadway, something like that, we require that those connections be scored concrete, pavered brick, something like that to further delineate those crossings. I believe he wanted it to clarify that because the condition reads pedestrian connectivity sidewalks shall be made scored concrete, pavers, and bricks. So they requested clarification that it's at roadways and commercial crossings. Shouldn't be an issue. That's where we would require them anyways. The whole sidewalks do not have to be scored paver or concrete. And I believe condition number 21 talked about the sidewalks where it was a 4-foot wide for residential and then 5-foot wide for commercial. If that's the wish of the board, we could clarify that. So.
All right, does the applicant have any questions for staff? Does the board have any questions for staff?
Joe, I have a question. I thought the Americans with Disability Act had a specific requirements for sidewalks.
I cannot speak to ADA requirements. I'm not familiar with those.
And I thought it was 5-foot minimum, but I could be wrong.
There are instances in the Land Development Code that require 5 foot, but there's also the comprehensive plan policy that says you can go down to 4 if it's on both sides of the roadway. So we prefer 5, but there is some leniency on that, at least in our Land Development Code. I do not know about ADA.
But you would be subject to federal requirements, is that true, Ms. Attorney?
We wouldn't be subject to federal requirements. Whoever was providing the sidewalks would be. So Mr. Pigeon would be responsible for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
Joe, do you think that this condition number 1, is that enough to cover with the GNC excluded uses, where it just says "and narrative and remainder of application"? The narrative is enough to say, okay, we have GNC with these excluded uses, or do we need a specific condition?
I
for
believe
that?
that's why we added the narrative into this condition, is because there are some components in that narrative that are not shown on the master plan that we wanted to include into this, so I think it would cover that. But if you wanted to make a separate condition excluding the uses provided by the applicant, we can do that. That's
Well, my thought is that, let's say, for example, years down the road, something happens, it changes hands, and then someone's looking into this, and they see this, and they don't have the narrative, but they see these conditions, and they make a decision on whether or not to buy that property based upon the ordinance and conditions, and they don't have the narrative, and that's not exactly spelled out clearly.
I mean, the narrative would be part of the record as well as the master plan, so hopefully that would still be available.
Okay. That's all.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Shara.
Good morning, Joe. Just a couple of questions. And you touched on this, but the report, the staff report indicates that the 4-inch and 8-inch diameter force main requires improvements. And one of the reasons of my question to the developer initially is when they were looking at the studies they're doing, I focused on traffic, but the same thing would come back to other critical infrastructure, water, wastewater. Is the total impact of these systems being studied on a comprehensive basis, in a totality? So you've got Crystal Ridge, now you've got the town center. So when we look at these comments, do these comments reflect the impact of both developments? Or are they focused only on, the incremental or marginal amount being added by the town center?
I don't think I can speak for Water Resources, who provided the letter stating that improvements may be required in the future, but I'm assuming that they're looking at all proposed impacts to their system.
Based on what they know already?
Right.
Not what's in place, but what they know is coming through the pipe, no pun intended.
I would hope that they are analyzing their system based on.
All right, so if there are requirements improved, or, if there are, improvements required, who bears the burden of those costs?
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay.
So.
Madam Attorney, do you know?
I'm
If
sorry,
there are-
I was reading excluded uses. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. No, if there are improvements required to, for instance, the wastewater system, the sanitary sewers, the force mains, how is that cost determined? And is it negotiated between the developer and the county? Or how are those typically handled down the road? Because we're seeing a situation where they're saying the system is nearing full capacity.
Nearing isn't there yet. So if this gets approved and later on our system needs upgrades, that would be the county would have to pay for it.
Okay, so there is no impact fee associated with the county charging this developer for
Well,
improvements?
they have to pay impact fees on each unit that's constructed. So those impact, but I don't think we have any kind of sewer and water
Okay.
impact fees.
So the fact
If
that the
they're
system.
if they're meeting concurrency today, then they're meeting concurrency today.
So
And
it's a black and white issue. Yeah.
if they wrote a letter, which I'm assuming you're reading a letter from utilities saying that they meet concurrency.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. Got it. Transportation, there was a reference for need a cross-access connection to properties in the south. Is that still an active item?
So typically, cross-access is required on arterial and collector roadways between non-residential properties. And so the HDR designation is a residential designation, even though it's high intensity. And then the school is the property to the south. So cross-access is something that's typically taken care of through technical services. I don't know if they would require cross-access for this connection to the school, and I don't even know if the school would allow cross-access connection to their property, so I don't know.
So not a major item?
The short answer is no.
Okay, fair enough.
I didn't think so.
Let's not dwell on those things we don't have to even think about. When you look at the drawings and you look at buffers, the buffer type and width varies even along the west side. And there's two different types, two different widths, and also along the north side. So for instance, on the north side, you have existing residences. And if I recall properly, what the report says is there's going to be a type A sod strip or trees, but it's a type A buffer. And that's between, it's at the property line between the proposed development and the existing residences. Is that accordance with the LDC? It's just a standard, if you go from one development to another private residence, it's a type A?
The buffer requirements depend on the abutting land uses, right? So for the non-residential components, we typically go to section 3740 or 3745 to find out what the buffer requirements would be. And so that would be, for example, that would be the commercial component of this one. So that would be the GNC section and the multifamily section. For single family, they don't fall under those sections of the land development code. And so chapter 5, which is our landscaping chapter of the code, states that residential developments abutting other residential developments, single family, don't have a buffer requirement between the two. So that's where that 5-foot sodded strip comes in. It's just to make sure you've got a little bit of grass area between the developments. But the applicant stated that they may put in a type A buffer, which is one of the landscape buffers that we have, as opposed to a sodded strip. And so the buffer requirement is going to vary around the project depending on what the abutting uses are. So where you have residential to residential, there really is no buffer requirement. Where you have the recreation to residential, you've got a different buffer requirement. Where you've got commercial to the school, there's a different buffer requirement. So that's one reason it varies as you go around the project.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions to staff? Joe, I got a couple. Go back to the buffers. Is the county satisfied with the way the buffers are, with the deviations? That I believe I counted 18 deviations.
I have to refresh my memory as to what the deviation was with the buffer. So I believe one of them is on the east side, South Rock Crusher Road. It varies, and so there's an average 20-foot if it's retained vegetation or 25-foot if planted. So I believe that's the 20-foot type C that would be required if it was a large non-res project abutting a collector. Typically a 25-foot type C would be required along the roadway. And so it seems like they have a average of 20 foot if they retain natural vegetation, which we support retaining natural vegetation, but typically the width would still have to be there. So they're requesting a deviation for that. Overall, it seems like they're meeting most of the buffer requirements. So I think there was also one about having some landscaping around the DRAs.
Yeah, that was my next question.
That was a little confusing.
The DRAs, the one tree, the location of the tree. You know.
Well, the one tree is for the residential lots.
Right.
So land development code requires a minimum of 2 trees per residential lot, either be saved when you're creating those lots, or if you had to do, if you had to clear it for grading purposes or whatnot, then you had to plant 2. So they're requesting that requirement be that they have 1 tree per lot, and if they have to have 2, let them have that second tree be in the roadway for streetscaping.
So what about the deviation for the signage?
Staff doesn't think that there's much necessity for a subdivision identification sign for an emergency access point along the roadway.
Just, and what about the ISR? Which ain't much, but just
Right.
your county opinion.
As the board is aware, I'm sure, we've seen a lot of these types of subdivisions coming in lately as part of PUDs. And some of them do have an allowance for higher ISR. So it's not uncommon to see these more compact developments have increased impervious surface, as long as, staff just wants to make sure they don't get too crazy with it, get a little too high. But the impervious surface of 65% for a residential development of 5,000 square foot lots seems to be pretty consistent with what we've seen previously.
That's objective criteria.
Are you reading my mind?
No, I'm just, don't get too crazy with it. I'm not sure how I write that into a code.
Then my last question is, I'm sure, or have you had an opportunity to read their traffic report, or
I'm not familiar.
as technical services, or will they review that?
Yes, technical services will review it if they have not already. I'm assuming that they reviewed that prior to providing us comments.
So as long as we keep the conditions the same, I don't have a problem with this. Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
Commissioner Shara.
I'm sorry. Commissioner
Go ahead.
Worthington,
Go ahead.
All right. I don't, help me out, teach me. The traditional housing, the setback, I can't visualize the 10 feet versus the 20 feet. So can you describe where the 10 feet starts? Is it at the edge of the curb? Is it at the edge of the sidewalk?
It would be the edge of the property line. So when they plat this, they will plat those roadways as rights of way. Within the right of way, you typically have the pavement and curbing and sidewalk, and then outside of that, and then some green space, and then that's all usually contained within that right of way. So the 10 foot and the 20 foot is from the front property line. So if you were to purchase one of those units and it was platted with its own lot, from that front property line abutting that right of way in is the setback.
So it's 10 feet from the right-of-way line, which would, if you take the curb of the street, you add the 4 or 5 foot of sidewalk width as gets defined. And then is there a tree lawn in there as well?
The applicant has indicated they propose some streetscaping, but I guess there's no real mandate for that.
Okay, so simplistically, the front of the house, if you will sit 10 feet from the edge of the sidewalk, on the inside edge of the sidewalk.
It depends on where the sidewalk is within the right of way, but
Okay.
if you think of it as your property lines, if you're the homeowner, your front property line, wherever that front property line is, in 10 feet is where they're proposing
Okay.
the setback.
That's compared to 20 feet, which is standard.
Well, 20 feet would still be reduced.
Or 25, excuse me.
25 is land development code.
Okay. Now, there's a picture shown, and it might just be a representation, that in the back of these traditional family units, you have an alley. And there was some discussion about the proper width of the alley, whether it was, and I believe the county standard said 20 feet, if I recall properly.
I believe that
But
was
then-
a comment from technical services.
But then you have your garage in the back. And the picture seemed to indicate, and we can go to the picture and look at it, but the picture seemed to indicate a very, very short driveway to the front of your garage off of the street, not deep enough to have a full car. So and I don't know if that's a detail to be worked out in plating, but right now, what's being shown is if you wanted to pull your car into your driveway in front of your garage door, it wouldn't fit.
Yeah, I would probably have to defer to the applicant to explain the rendering that they provided. I believe I know which one you're discussing. So I don't know I don't have the details to know.
So for instance,
how much is going to be in there.
I'm not being, hopefully I'm not being pedantic, but if you want to wash your car, you have to park your car in the alley to wash it or have it extend into the alley. I'm not sure if that's what's intended, but right now in that traditional family approach, which seems like a valid approach, it seems like it's really jammed in there.
Yeah, I'd probably have the applicant clarify that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney.
I just, if I could go back to page 157 and the question about the sewer. Within that letter, our engineer says that the county's wastewater collection transmission system in the vicinity, it says, we anticipate that some off-site transmission system improvements may be needed to accommodate this proposed development. So that if there are off-site improvements that are required, that would be the responsibility of the applicant because it's disclosed in the letter. I think I might have said otherwise, but I was talking about after the project is done and completed, if our system needs improvements, it would be county improvements, but it looks like that we've disclosed to them that there may be off-site improvements needed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stone.
To expand on Jeff's question about room to back your car out of your garage, I mean, a typical car is like 16, 18 feet. If you're going to clear your doorway, that's what you need. Some of these things all relate. Most of them all relate to, density. By decreasing the setback, you reduce the size of the yard. So now you have a problem meeting the 2 trees per requirement, and then you've got a problem meeting the ISR. So by increasing the density, you've given yourself problems with, or decreasing the density, you've given yourself problems with meeting the ISR, meeting the setback, and meeting the tree requirement. So they all build one another by the fact of, increasing the density. And I can understand why the developer wants to do that. I mean, he wants to maximize the amount of houses he can sell for a particular piece of ground. But that doesn't make it more livable by decreasing that density. That's not a question, that's just a statement.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up ISR again, because that was what my comment was going to be before, after the chair asked about that. I thought about the ISR also, and Ms. Lynn commented that it's what an objective criteria you had presented. But I think we do have an objective criteria, but that criteria is set for, individual construction. And then this is something different. It's more of a comprehensive planned unit development. And like you said, we are seeing a lot of things coming online with more modern techniques. And when we take it to effect, they might have a higher ISR, but this development is multiple acres and includes a lot of open space and recreation, as we could see. That's all. It's not a question either.
Thank you. I do have a couple more questions that I overlooked on multiple pages I have, Joe. One, where's the nearest fire department at to this site?
I can't answer that. I have no idea.
The only one I know about is on Rock Crusher, so I just want to know if that was the servicing area, or do you have any idea?
I have no idea.
My next question is the irrigation. There's no reclaimed water proposed here. Our water shortage is terrible now. I can only water my yard once a week. I pay more money in my yard than I do taxes to keep it green. Is there something that we can do to make them put reclaimed water in, or control our infrastructure of the water? Because we're using a whole lot of water.
I believe the water consumption would be something required through utilities as part of their water use permit. I don't think we have anything in the land development code that would limit their water consumption. The applicant may want to address that. I remember in one of their slides they had a picture of Florida-friendly landscaping in there.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think we have anything in the land development code we can use to restrict that.
Typically, like when we do, you call the water company or send a letter to get a, permission, or, can this attain? Irrigation's never been brought up to me, at least. So I'm pretty sure it's probably not being brought up to the developers. So we kind of sneak in and say, oh yeah, well, that's just an assumption. We assume that everybody's going to have irrigation. But with our water shortages and the problem that we're having right now, I thought it would be a good time to ask that question. Is there a reclaimed water in provision or LDC or?
No.
No.
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's as simple as we can say it, no.
Thank you.
Just give the direct answer, Joe, no.
No.
I knew the answer, I just wanted to hear it again. Because I'm sure that question will be brought up. Any other questions to the staff? Does the applicant have any rebuttal to staff?
Chuck Pigeon, once again, just to clarify a few things, to help understanding, just on the water and sewer. We are very, very familiar with the systems of both water and sewer. We've modeled them as consultants for Citrus County. And there may be some offsite impacts with the lift station that's at the intersection of Rock Crusher Road and Crystal Oaks Drive. It may have to be upgraded. Right now, it's got plenty of capacity. Just a little background history. The force main that runs up Rock Crusher Road was the artery and only pipeline that serviced all of Homosassa Springs, and River Haven, and everything down south of Chesapeake. We had designed for the county a few years ago a new pipeline up Highway 19. All that sewer was switched over, for the most part, to Highway 19. So now we have an 8-inch force main on Rock Crusher Road that's over capacity, underutilized, and actually creating more maintenance problems for the county because it doesn't have enough flow. So this development is actually going to help that situation. The pump station at the corner has sufficient capacity. So we don't believe there's, in the way of off-site utilities, there's going to be much in the way of impacts, but the developer would handle and take care of that through the improvement plan review process and the engineering review for the specific design. Any upgrades, it's part of the improvement plan approval process to do that. That's codified in the water and sewer agreement that every development must enter into with the county utility department. So in the water and sewer agreement, if it said you need to upgrade the pump station, that's where it's addressed. And every single lot, every single unit pays an impact fee for both water and sewer, for the plant capacity and for the off-site utilities themselves that run up and down the roads. So whether we increase the capacity and add utilities to the system and pay for those utilities, we still have to pay the impact fees. Unless we oversize it for future, then we get some impact fee credits. So hopefully that addresses your concern about off-site impacts for water and sewer. Reclaimed water, we'd love to use that reclaimed water. It's less expensive, but the county just doesn't have it, doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the infrastructure to support it, especially here. Any reclaimed water would be used in the County Road 486 corridor. That's where the reclaimed water lines are. It's near the Meadowcrest water plant, near the Brentwood water plant. That's the core where they could sell and get the water used. They just don't have enough capacity. I want to address the alleys in the back. And unfortunately, the picture does not do justice for the plan for this development. That particular picture shows a driveway, the alley, and it shows the garage at the absolute minimum setback of 5 feet. I think it's actually like 7 feet. We would never do that. Our intention is to have the houses at the 10-foot front yard setback, gives us the additional 10 feet in the back, so we have a total length where if someone did park outside their garage, they're not parking in the alley. That's the whole purpose of making sure we get enough room. So we do not actually do what's in that photo. I don't believe there's any other questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. If you concluded, you may sit down. All right, this time the public portion of the meeting will now be open. If there's anyone present who would like to speak on this application, please come forward to the podium. And as a reminder, individuals have 3 minutes and organizations have 5 minutes. When speaking on this application, please address the board. And if you have any documentation that you want to be entered into record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary. And good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Paul Darty. I live at 3481 West King B Street. Y'all have seen me quite a bit out here. My particular issue does not pertain just to this particular thing in front of us today. The county is building or permitting, I guess you'd say, dozens apparently of these little village-like type of things. They're scattered hither, thither, and yon all over the county. Each one of them creates its own sewage and water issues. Our main capacity for getting rid of sewage right now is Crystal River sends about 1 million gallons up to the power plant. We have a Meadowcrest facility that's taking care of the, I guess you'd say, upper center of the county. But down this way, it's kind of lacking. Everything needs to be pumped 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 miles, apparently, to this Meadowcrest plant or some other such place. Sooner or later, the county is going to have to reckon with the fact that this sewage is not going anywhere except uphill to a plant. My suggestion was, if you're going to make all these little villages, if you're going to make every one of these little self-contained type of entities, give them a nice little package plant to go with it. Keep the sewage local, right there with the people who are generating it. You get your reclaimed water from there. You don't have to pump it all over creation. You don't have a lot of expensive infrastructure between hither, thither, and yon. The county currently is under the auspices, I believe, of DEP with the BMAP plans that we have. They're trying to basically move away from traditional septics toward these kind of little mini package plants that everybody has in their front yards. The water and sewer takes care of itself right there on the property. You could consider that for this, except for the density. It's way too dense. So you have to kind of bring it together, put it in a package plant. The county has a number of these package plants, mostly in RV parks, trailer parks, things like that. They've been operating for years. They're not on the county grid. I would suggest that when you start considering water and sewer in these areas, start considering these type of things. I'm sure there are places on site, and some of these larger ones for sure, that you can park one of these things. And yes, just like the sewer plants, they do occasionally have smell issues. But sending all that smell to one particular area in the county is a little bit unfair. And once you start putting these major plants out there, you're guaranteed to get issues with them. Please consider this when you consider this type of application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else like to speak on this application? No one? Does the applicant have any rebuttal to the public input? All right, this time I'm going to close the public input portion of the meeting down and bring the discussion back to the board. Here we go, commercial.
I actually have a question for Mr. Dixon at the end. What is isn't there an expansion discussed for the Rock Crusher School there? Where would that expansion go? Would it go like more north where that opening is?
Well, the intent is to line
The
it up.
intent, sorry.
Yes, to line it up with that opening.
Okay. Do we know the intent on that anyway? Is that something 5-10 years out or 2-3 years out, if you had to guess?
Well, the master plan's out for bid now, and it's in the work plan as a master plan project. The actual capital project is not in the work plan yet, but
Okay.
I'm working on that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or discussions?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Worthington.
Thanks. Reviewing the application, I found this design was very beautiful. I like the community, the way it was developed. It's modern, and I know Mr. Stone often remarks that it's not livable, and how I think that other people like to live in different ways, and there's a lot of demand for different types of communities. So I think that this could be something that is in demand. And another positive was the walkability. I like the fact that you can walk. I mean, I was disappointed to hear there weren't sidewalks going on Seven Rivers, but I think as many sidewalks as we can get is a benefit for our community and county all the way around. I, unfortunately though, would not be willing to support this application, mostly because of the blanket GNC inside the community and the way it's being developed. I understand that you want commercial and stores for them to be able to shop right there locally and not have to travel and have that walkability. But we have, and I know you have the excluded uses, but we do have other zoning classifications that maybe could have accomplished this better. Like we have neighborhood commercial, which I think would have, put exactly into the zoning what you wanted or desired from that location. The ambiguity of GNC and not knowing what the uses are going to be precludes me from being able to support this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Worthington. Any other discussions from the board? Commissioner Shara.
As I've mentioned in the past, I've lived in a community similar to this in Jupiter, and these communities do work. The kind of nits and nats that I was bringing up in terms of, driveway length in front of a traditional, traditional townhome, these are the things, though, that make the livability issue we talked about a little bit better. There are some deviations that you've requested that I don't, honestly, in all fairness, don't think are absolutely necessary. If we vote to approve this today, then we vote to approve it with a set of conditions. So the question for the developer is, does he accept the county's conditions? We never asked that question earlier today. Are we permitted to have an exchange? Madam Attorney?
Up to the chair.
Yes, I'd like to hear that answer because we did forget to ask that question. So I will entertain just that question, Chuck.
Yes, sir. I thought I made it clear that we were in favor and accept the conditions as modified.
As written.
As written in our presentation.
And the
There's
county's-
a few clarifications mainly. There were clarifications of those conditions, of which we had discussed with staff.
Let me ask you this question, and have you reviewed the county's conditions?
Yes, sir.
So we're only going to discuss the county conditions, not what you changed. The question that he was asking is, have you read and do you accept or would you be willing to accept the county's conditions without your modifications?
I believe the question to that is, it presents more complications and confusion if they're not clarified. Even though staff intended them to be clear, they're not. We cleaned them up to be clear, with the exception of the 10-foot setback and one tree in front of the house at the road as opposed to on the lot. There's a couple little minor, everything else is just clarification, so that there's no confusion going forward.
Does that satisfy your question, Commissioner Shara?
I'm afraid in my mind it doesn't. I understand that you've made some clarifications. I've not studied your clarifications to the county's proposed conditions. I really think these are workable items that can be resolved. My concern is if we approve this, it just gets approved and it's resolved. If we have to find a way to get some resolution on your requested exceptions. I mean, one is to say no, the other is to say yes. I think that probably the middle ground is it's going to take some time for you to work with staff to resolve those. Because as they stand right now, I can't vote yes for what I haven't studied, and you can't say yes to what the county's proposing. So there has to be a middle ground that we need to get resolved.
Let's just all due
Mr.
respect.
Chair,
Hold
if
it.
I think the county had come to consensus with the applicant on some of those conditions. And I think Joe, when he was doing his presentation, admitted that, regarding number one, the sidewalks, that while that clarification did make sense to both the staff and the applicant. So I think that there was consensus on some of those conditions. And I think Joe could, and the applicant could tell you what those were.
So, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Pigeon. We'll continue our
Thank you.
discussion here.
I'm not going to put you on the spot, but in terms of you made a presentation that included deviations. Could you just repeat, please, which of those deviations that you think are significant that we should focus on? Focus by exception.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the staff report, page 302 is the beginning of the conditions.
Everybody get to page 302.
So, condition 3 talks about the setbacks. So staff had put in there the setback of 20 feet from, and as Mr. Pigeon stated, some of this was clarification. He said from the front property line. Staff just has 20 feet from the property line. But they say front setback, which would assume it's from the front property line. But the applicant is asking for 10 feet for the townhomes from the front property line. So that was actually going to be one of the things that I wanted to get clarification on as from this board, which way you wanted to go with that. Did you want to go with the applicant's requested 10-foot for the townhomes or have it larger? And then there was also,
Okay, let's deal with that one. Let's deal with that one first. So so they want to insert the word, or you want to insert the word front property line? Is that what you got written there? I see.
that's what I have written down.
All right,
Yeah.
so,
And unfortunately, I don't have his PowerPoint with his modifications.
well, if the
in
board
front
is
of me.
going to make a motion, they need to know what they're going to say about paragraph number 3. So you want that to say 20 feet from the front property line.
10 or 10.
I'm sorry, currently says 20 from the front property line, and then the added suggestion that the board has to consider is whether or not they want to change that to 10 feet from the front property line. Okay? Everybody know that?
So, my opinion is I'm not in any type, I wouldn't change the conditions at all. It would still read 20 feet from the property line, not their suggested 10 feet. And I don't know how the rest of the board is consensus to that.
Okay, maybe we should just keep going then.
And then another one of the modifications was, as part of that same condition, it says, the front setback for commercial structures shall be, and what they requested was 10 feet from the property line. Staff has in there 25 feet for the condition. And then there was the clarification that setbacks from public county arterial or collector roadways shall be per the land development code. So that would differentiate from their internal collector roadway.
And do you want it to say 25 feet from the front property line in that second sentence? Or the second part of that sentence?
I don't believe that was a clarification that was proposed.
Okay.
Number 3.
They just want 10.
What's going on?
Mr. Chair, I'm
I was
sorry.
just reading, I apologize.
No, I don't know if the board is inclined to approve this or not. So I don't know whether we should be going into this level of detail of the conditions until you find out if the board's inclined to, because if the board isn't inclined to approve it, then talking about what the conditions should be really isn't relevant. I mean, I'm just reading faces.
I agree. So we'll move on. We'll come back to this if we need to. And at this time, if there's any more discussion from the commissioners on this, we can discuss. If not, I could look for a motion because I totally agree. My output on it is I'm with Commissioner Worthington. I was so uncertain on the GNC part of it, the density part of it, the high density scares me. So I would not be in favor of this application.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner?
For once, I concur with Commissioner Worthington.
For once.
I would agree with her that the GNC needs to be corrected. As far as condition number 3 that Joe had, I think it reads fine just like it is.
Yes, sir.
Sir, just in, finalizing this process here, as you know, we've done in the past, I hear some of the objections, and I'd like the opportunity to solve those before you actually continue with your, the vote or whatever, because I think we have answers to those, but you just got to give me a couple weeks or so to get those answers solved. They're very easily solved. So I would like to ask for your consideration for continuation, and perfect example is the request for the 20-foot and the 10-foot setback. That's easy. I can snap my fingers, no problem. I just switch it out. It's not a better product. I think it's a worse product, but that's my opinion. But I mean, I can do that in 5 seconds flat, and quite frankly, it's cheaper, right? What we were proposing was a little better, a little more expensive, but the builders don't like it anyway. So those are things I'll just take back. We'll make the modifications exactly as what, the comments that I've been getting. Happy to do that, and look at the other ones. I think that we can work with staff a little and just clear up some of those confusions, because that's all it is. We're on the same page. So if you would entertain that, I would appreciate that.
So I get a motion for...
Motion to continue.
Second.
Got a motion from Commissioner Worthington, for a second by Commissioner Gilbert. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Here, to continue, it's been granted. Thank you, sir. All right, now we're ready for CPA AA PUD -2024-00019 for Lecanto Preserves. The staff presentation, or the...
Thank you. Clark Stillwell for Sterling Residential LLC and Sterling Commercial LLC, Lecanto Preserve. This request is to change the future land use and LDC Atlas designation from GNC to MDR on 3 acres to modify and expand an existing PUD on 142 acres, to modify the southern access to County Road 491 and allow additional single-family lots. Aerial view of the subject property. Aerial view of the portion changing from GNC to MDR and the area accessing North Lecanto Highway. View of the subject property on the left and the entrance drive to be modified. The proposed land use request. The master plan, including the revision area as submitted by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Stillwell.
Good afternoon.
Oh, yes, good afternoon.
Oh, goodness.
Clark Stillwell, 320 South Highway 41, the Brandon Bank Building in Inverness, Florida, on behalf of Sterling Residential LLC. This matter came before you. It was filed in December. We had a hearing on it, and we got into a discussion about issues such as a light signalization and cross access. We asked for continuance, and we've modified the original application. The 3.1 acres that was designated in the PowerPoint now is proposed to go from GNC use with an access point, okay, on the County Road 491 to MDR without an access point. And under the master plan, as you can see there, majority of that is now a drainage retention area. Now, since we have had that last hearing, we have also submitted to the county as of July of this year a written agreement that codifies who's going to do what. The reason this all started was when we got an approved master site plan. It's somewhere in that PowerPoint. I think it's the one before this. I know it's in the PowerPoint that Joe gave me. No, keep going. Maybe it's afterwards.
Is it in yours, Joe?
I think it's in mine,
Yeah, it's in his. So we went to develop the project, and county engineering looked at us and said, notwithstanding the fact that we've already approved an access cut onto County Road 491, you don't like, that access point doesn't meet separation standards under the code, and we would like it revised. That's the current proposed one. Keep going, young lady. Thank you. See if you can find the original. No. No, go back one. So we then went into a discussion with the neighbors to the south about a possible joint roadway. Then we got into a discussion with the county about just using their roadway. And the county indicated to us that their preference is that we not have that access point, which was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, and there only be one access point, and there'd be a joint access point that would serve this residential project and the county property. So we filed the amendment. It takes the piece from GNC to MDR, and it addresses the separation issue, going from 2 roadways on 491 in this location down to 1. And the way it would work is the county is going to plat on their property the roadway design. The developer is going to build, pursuant to the agreement on the county property, the roadway. And then it will be dedicated to the public, that portion that is on the county's property. So it'll be, that portion will be a public roadway. Within the DA, there's a requirement that we give them 300 square feet of property so they can meet some turning movements. There's discussion about drainage, discussion about signage and all that. So that's why we're here. I can tell you that the rest, also, the new master plan has phasing out, phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 is 278 units. It's currently received preliminary plat approval, and we're doing the improvement plans as we speak on that. And then hopefully they'll be finalized in that project. Phase 1 part of it can proceed. So this addresses the separation issue that the county raised post the prior approval. It's a better use. What the current proposal called for a light here. The current proposal says the light will be evaluated at the time this is platted, and if the traffic study warrants it, the light will be put in. If it doesn't warrant it, then it would not be put in. And the reason you don't want to do the traffic study now is because there's all types of projects going up and down this roadway, and the amount of background traffic today could be X. The amount of background traffic in 3-4 years when this is ready to be platted could be X plus a number. And you want to address the future conditions as best you can. So it's not a question of will. The question is the light warranted? And the point is, if the traffic study mandates it, then it's put in. If not, then it's not. The other point that came out of this was previously there was a request for cross-access across this. With the MDR designation, the cross-access goes away, and that's deleted out of the county staff comments. So let me see if I've missed anything. There is a cleanup amendment to the text. If you recall, the second go-around, not the first go-around of this project, we amended it to add the VA clinic on the north end in the phase 1 area. This project was not awarded the VA site, so we eliminate that. And finally, there is a small reduction in total density. As pointed out in the staff report, we go from 619 units to 582 residential units. So slight reduction in density. The approval of a joint singular access point which will serve the county site and will serve this particular site when phase 2 is platted. Traffic studies will be done. They're going to do a traffic study when phase 1 is done relative to Laurel Street, and we'll do a traffic study when this is platted in the future. The staff conditions as written are acceptable. Didn't want anybody to miss that. Do you have any questions?
Does the staff have any questions for applicant?
No, sir.
Does the board have any questions for the applicant?
the picture of the entranceway off to 491 that you've got there, that's not the one that you're asking to be approved, is that correct? The one
There's
that-
a blow-up that shows exactly what we're asking to be approved, and I think this is what will be approved.
Okay, that one, all right.
Right. You see go ahead.
They just move so fast, my head was swimming.
That's okay. The last one is a blow-up of that particular section to give you further. Go to the next one, please, ma'am. That one is a blow-up of that particular area that we're speaking to. The deletion of the commercial on the front, a downzoning, to those limited residential units, and then the access points. Again, the plat, county property will be done by the county. When it's platted, the developer will do the actual roadway from that point there east to 491. You can see where the signage is located on the developer's property. And signalization is a function of what the traffic is in the future. If it's warranted, it's warranted. If it's not, it's not. It's kind of a black and white thing, signals. 3 criteria: number of trips, number of turning movements, number of accidents, and most importantly, number of fatal accidents. Define whether you get a light or not. I had a homeowners association all scream at me, we want a light, we want a light. And I said, well, we need a couple volunteers for criteria number 3.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Shara.
only one question. This work will be done associated with Phase 1.
Phase 2. Phase 1 is to the north, and it's on Laurel Street, and it's 278 units. Is there a typo in there that we missed, Joe?
I could have missed it. Okay.
Phase 2.
The residents can be okay driving by the fire training facility?
Well, they're going to drive by it before, and it's the south entrance, it's not the main entrance. There's, in the development agreement, there's conditions about landscaping and who maintains it and who pays for that, the developer, if they elect to put it in. If you do it now and it's up front, it's all part of their due diligence.
It does say Phase 1 in number 13. If I read that correctly, Joe.
Where at?
It's conditions number 13, sub-bullet 1. If I read it correctly, I believe it says Phase 1.
First bullet is on Laurel Street, which is to the north in Phase 1.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I got it.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just want to go back and emphasize, there was an approved entranceway on the County Road 491 by this board and Board of County Commissioners. The county came to us and said, we don't want or like this design. What can we do to correct it? And working with the county, this is going to correct it for the better, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Can we get the staff introduction, please?
Joe Hockedale, Land Development. This application is basically a continuance of the previous application, which was PUD 2024-00014. That application was proposed to make some of these modifications. The applicant then decided to include the land use change portion of it for the subject property. And so you can see here in red, that's the expansion portion. That's the little piece up along 491 that they're including into this application. And then this is the modification portion. It's basically the little stub out that goes to 491 from the remainder of the project. And so you can see it here. As Mr. Stillwell is stating, there's an existing county entrance just to the north of this, which they are proposing to now connect to, and that will be platted as a roadway up to their entrance, and then the remainder of their entrance will be private. And so you can see this is a picture of the entrance as it is right now. And the parcel right up in the front is currently general commercial, and so this application is proposing to make that change to medium density residential, which further fits with the rest of what they're proposing in that area, and it also removes the requirement for cross access to the parcel to the south. And so this was the previously approved master plan from PUD 2023-00007, showing the previous layout that Mr. Stillwell was discussing. With this change, they add a little more residential lots to this section, but the proposal in total includes the portion up on the north by Laurel Street. There's no longer the VA request as part of this, and there's some other minor modifications through the site. So they actually reduce the number of total lots within this development by about 37, as Mr. Stillwell stated. They go from 619 to 582. So, and again, you can see here the difference between the previous approved master plan with this entrance to 491 and this proposal. So this is still compatible with the surrounding area. It makes modifications to this entrance that was discussed with technical services, and all the findings are positive, and we do have modified conditions from the prior approved PUD as part of this.
Thank you, Joe. Applicant have any questions?
No, sir, thank you.
Does the board have any questions for staff? Joe, they're letting you off the hook. Thank you, Joe. At this time, the public portion of the meeting will now be open. If there's anyone present who would like to speak on this application, please come forward to the podium. As a reminder, individuals have 3 minutes and organizations have 5 minutes. When speaking on this application, please address the board. If you have any documentation that you want to be entered into record, please provide a copy to the recording secretary. Anyone? Last call. At this time, the public portion of the meeting will be closed. We're going to bring the discussion back to the board for further discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Worthington.
for the purposes of motion, the Planning and Development Commission finds application number CPA/AA/PUD 2024-00019 consistent with the Citrus County Comprehensive Plan and Citrus County Land Development Code, and that this board recommends approval with conditions of the application to the Board of County Commissioners based upon the evidence and testimony presented and the staff report and conclusions regarding this petition.
Second.
So we got a first by Commissioner Worthington and a second by Commissioner Gilbert. Any further discussion? I just want to ask Stillwell, Mr. Stillwell, are you okay with the conditions as they're written in there?
Yes, sir, as I stated.
Because, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right. So you have any announcements today?
Yeah, just to let y'all know, I don't believe we have any other, or we don't have a second hearing for this month. There's not one,
Correct.
a
There's
second
one
one in
meeting on the
September. So the next two coming up would be October 3rd and October 17th. It looks like we have 3 applications for each one of those, which, as the residents came earlier this morning, one of those is the Pressman, is going to be on October 17th. And we did have some of these scheduled for BCC tentatively, but it seems like the the one for Mr. Stillwell, I don't see on the list. So I don't know when that's going to BCC.
Any other discussion by the commissioners? I just have one comment that was asked for me to ask. I was at a hearing impaired conference in Citrus County last week, and they asked this question, and I didn't know how to answer it, and I didn't want to call Madam Attorney to ask how to answer that question, so therefore I did not answer that question. I told them I would get back to them. They want to know why we do not have a hearing impaired interpreter at the BOCC meetings and our PDC commission hearings. So that's a question out there. We'll have an answer eventually at one point or the other. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Solid question.